B, which is hopefully exciting news.
Yeah, Mel do that.
I'm not sure what exciting might mean.
I'll just introduce us at the start here. My name's Mel Halliday. I'm the South Island Revaluation Manager for QV. Some of you may remember me as Mel Bow as a Vincent Community Board back in the early 2010s, something, sure too. Yeah. So Tim is the lead valuer for Central Otago, so he's going to run us through everything of what we've been up to for sort of the last 6 months. And we've also got, so Tim's been in our Alex office for 5 years now. So awesome to have him locally driving this revaluation. And we've also just got our grad Harry in the corner here. He's just moved here from Christchurch, so he's only a couple of weeks in, so he's just come in to observe. But he has signed up for the Alexandra Rugby Club, which is
That's not
yeah. We've got Matat. There could be some interesting dynamics.
It's like a losing, that's why.
Yeah, I know. We just about kicked him out of the office for his losing streak.
Anyway, come on.
Hey everyone, I'm Tim Ford. I've been around for a few years now, and it's good to lead the local reval. We work the whole lower South Island, so it's good to be local. There's a lot going on, basically, Central Otago. It's that cusping point between Queenstown or urban development in rural New Zealand. So it's really managing that cusping point is probably the key point of what the revaluation was. Should have a presentation, hopefully. Yeah.
Stand by, Paula.
Yeah, that's right.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I know, so crack on, eh? Slides. So rating valuations are done under the Rating Valuations Act in '98, and over time they refresh the rules. So the current rules is basically interpretation of the Rating Valuations Act. So the last set of rules that came out in 2008, but they're currently undergoing a review. So it's a very high likelihood next time we come to Central Otago that there'll be little tweaks and changes in how we're actually interpreting. And that's all the new things that have come out, like area support, probably things like solar, etc., which are hot topics that don't somehow fall through the cracks, but there isn't a clear methodology of how they should be dealt with. Then auditors, yeah, the Office of the Valuer General. So they peer review, well, they do our audit, I guess is the best way to put it. And that was Neil Sullivan, Alan Taylor. So we had the Valuer General and Deputy Valuer General auditing us. So big dogs, I guess.
Harry got to meet on his first day of work, so that's a pretty intimidating start.
Yeah. Next slide, please. What are they? So they're a snapshot of the market at a single point in time. So our revaluation date was the 1st of September, 2025. Previously, it was the 1st of October, which has confused a lot of people, 2022. But it's everything that's happened after that date, in theory, hasn't been taken into account. But where there's minimal market movement, it is. It's more things like legislation changes and whatnot. So I'm more focused on the rural myself, so I'll give examples of that. But if there is changes to dairy support rules and which allow different land uses after that date, we don't take that into account. So it really is that snapshot of the market with the legislation that 1st September.
I might just sort of jump in there on that one. One of the things that we discussed was, so Roxburgh, there was a report that came out just before we submitted the alluvial flood claims, and that isn't taken into account because it's about what the market knows at the 1st of September 2025. So that's just another one of those things that can be different playing out.
Well, another probably good example is the first home buyer market's been pretty strong, especially in Alexandra, like in the last 3 to 4 months after the reval date. So that's a good example of our reval figures might be slightly below what the current market value of that kind of segment is at the moment. Yeah, so it's just based off that date. Forestry is not as relevant, but the key point to get across is that values do not include plant and chattels, such as your carpet, your drapes and whatnot. That is not included in the rating values, as well as standing timber. And then if we throw in a wee solar comment as well. The actual panels themselves, they are a chattel technically, so they're not included. We can talk more about that later, I'm sure. And it's analysing sales evidence. Like we are purely looking at sales to work out what things are worth and then applying adjustments to the previous values. So it is a sales-based activity. Slide, please. That's just our process. Don't need to go too in depth with it. Yeah, it's just really gathering that sales information and then turning that into proposed adjustments or setting the new market levels. And there's also we have our own internal peer review, which we'll talk about in a second, and also that final audit process to get going. Yeah, so that's just a QA, quality assurance I was talking about. Don't need to go too in depth here, but yeah, next slide was probably also, do you have one about David and Dale?
It might be after.
We'll go forward one more. Right, go back.
Okay.
No, go back.
Don't worry.
Go back, yeah. Basically, we have two internal. We have an urban and a rural peer reviewer internally. David and Gail, they've been around for yonks. They know what they're doing, and they are both semi-local. Gail's, she has done Central Otago many times, I'm sure, and David is based in Dunedin and he understands what he's done. So we're very, very privileged to have that that knowledge, guiding us through as well. So the traffic light system is post-audit. So they decide what we get. So green, blue, orange, purple, red. And there's different lengths of delays and whatnot for that. So they do a 2-day audit with us and then they decide what traffic light we get given. And based off that, and that is all based off how much work they think needs to be done to the overall set before it gets finalised. So we got a green light. We're real happy. Everything on time. No worries. Next slide. Yeah. So other than floating around boat that we're doing all right with all the greens and blues, if you look there at the numbers, basically that shows kind of the different value movement that's going on throughout the country. And then in yellow, you can compare that to Central Otago. Bear in mind that the 8.1% isn't quite right, but you'll find that out in a minute. It's basically showing that there's growth here beyond, the rest of the country. We really have something going on here. We have people we have domestic migration, a little bit of international migration, especially from Australia. It is becoming, growing district. So it's good to see. I mean, Wellington, I'm aware of that, and that was last year. It's just horrible seeing what's going on with those markets, and it's causing real issues for people. So not having those problems is a real target.
So that residential change there, likes of Horowhenua and that, there's a percentage of the household change value.
So that's
For the
that.
3-year period. Yes.
Ending on 25.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So some of those will be 1 July 2025, but they're all the revaluations that have been done in the same cycle as Central Otago. So really, Gore is the only one that's sort of comparable to the value change that Central Otago has had, but very different value levels.
For those people, their $1 million house have lost $120,000 in equity.
Wellington has had over 25% reductions in values, and it's one of the things that we always say with these. It's not really any difference to you guys whether those values are going up 8%, dropping 8%, staying exactly the same in terms of how you set your rates. Like Wellington Council will still need to increase their rates however much, even on the back of the -25. The value changes don't relate to the rates increases. But I certainly think it becomes a little bit more palatable when the equity is not being lost and the rates are going up at the same time. I think, it helps.
Well, you've got a negatively geared New Zealand valuation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only about 2 regions, 3 regions.
Remember, this is a third of the region, New Zealand. I know it's still a good indicator for the wider New Zealand, but
Mm.
there is still another 2/3, and these districts vary, for who they are. They can be urban or versus rural,
So did the government have all this stuff before you bring it out in a level? Where do they set their understanding? Because if you take that, they turn around and say we can't have any more than 4% rate rise because they're going to have negatively geared in your rate values. How do they set theirs? They'll have their own numbers, won't they?
So, like you're talking about government in general.
Well, I mean, what to me is like you've got yours, they'll have information as well. Do they have their own or do they use quotable value as theirs?
No, I don't know anything, but the values are completely independent of the rates, the changes in value. Yeah.
Interesting.
That massive COVID high.
And look, and these numbers sort of bear out to a large extent what Matt Olsen briefed the business community last evening on what he's seen or what metrics they've seen in Central Otago. And it's in a whole lot of stats. Central Otago is one of 3 districts, 3 or 4 districts that is bucking the national trend in a whole lot of areas.
Correct.
It's clear to see, like, we did the Dunedin revaluation earlier in the period. In that overall, what CV change minus 0.1%, like there was really stagnant growth there, there wasn't growth, just stagnant. And all the rural areas that we have out here saw that, through the Cromwell Gorge, the Cromwell probably averaged 10 to 15% up, but through there, and we'll see that in a minute, we've got the individual for the different areas, but yeah, there's just areas I think in Central Otago that are a lot more positive, but we've got farming too, right? Coming off the back. So yeah, it's like I was saying, it's that cusping point between rural. That's basically for lack of a better word. But yeah. Slide, please. It's very lucky. We had a very experienced team, with a fresh face in there. We had one person pull out, but that was replaced by Tim Gibson, who's been here before presenting, and he's done, it'd be up to about 7 Central Otagos previous years. So he's been around a long time. So we're very happy that we have this resourcing available to do a good job. It's a complex district, so it always pays. Thanks a lot. There's the peer reviewers I was talking about, the Gail and David. Yeah. The next slide, please. That's our district. So Pigroot, Lake Hawea, out the back of Lake Hawea, we have a couple of properties that go over between Queenstown Lakes and Central Otago, and they're rated proportionally. Down into the Nevis and back at Gibson there. So, and down to Tibia. There's the cutoff down there, somewhere around Mills Flat.
Rose Junction.
Grace Junction, yeah. So, yeah, just to reiterate again, it is got everything going on in it, except for forestry, which is great. Do not want that. Wow, do what you want. Personally, I don't touch it. Yeah. We've got huge issues in. Say that. Next slide. Legislative change basically is what I'm getting at. I was about to say, and impacting markets, political legislative change that puts markets way up and then on the head down. So yeah, that's not a good fan of that. We like to try and keep uniformity in our values over the 3-year period. That's what we'd love to see is stable, obviously. But yeah, there's just a few key indicators and whatnot. Yeah, OCR is a good one to look at, and it's just a good slide to show that it's at the reval date. It's not today, the reval date, because these things have changed since. So this is something that we have to keep in mind as we see sales coming through. Next slide. It is the same thing in a different way, pretty much. Nothing too major. Yeah.
This is just more the Central Otago snapshot versus the national, which the key thing being there is the population growth, that Central Otago has positive population growth.
That's seen with all these developments coming through, through Cromwell and even here in Alexandra, just these sections that are coming to the market, and a significant number of vacant sections. Shannon's Farms just got title. So yeah. Next slide, please. All right, so this is our pre-audit overview. So this isn't I'll show you the finalised ones in the next slide. The only thing you need to look at here is the bottom number, is the percentage change, 8.1% on the CV, the capital value, is the total market value, yes, and 7.3% for the land value. At audit, we didn't have much to fix, but we had to do a review of our hydro. We had changed methodology of our hydro assessments. So that caused the Clyde Dam to go from about 700-800 million to 2.9 billion. That has swayed the statistics. So that 8% shows you what resi, commercial, industrial, lifestyle, rural, that's roughly what the actual district was moving. So it's just a bit of an anomaly. We go to the next slide. The 23.8%.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, if you keep that 8.1%, that's our key number there.
It's more of a fair representation of what the majority of your assessments will sort of be in the vicinity of versus that utilities going up 190%.
So we've got stats there for individual categories. All right, we've got the areas in a minute, but yeah, bear in mind the number of properties. So mining up 24%. Well, only 9 properties. That could be heavily influenced by other factors. The key ones there: lifestyle, residential, horticulture showing an increase. Now that's part of that. The land increase is kosher. It's good. The CV increase is probably taking into account new plantings too. So it's a bit of a false number. It would be less than that. We'll go back specifically cherries, grapes is kind of held. We'll talk about it in a minute, but I just don't want you to get swayed by 5.9.
Just with regard to the arable, do you foresee a change happening there
Yeah,
in our district?
Yeah. Elliot would like it, but no, we don't have arable categories. We just line it up with pastoral. That's more of a us thing, really, rather than anything else.
Do you suggest pastoral would be better than arable this year anyway, in terms of profit?
Oh, no, I just see there's going to be an increase in arable across our district.
Yeah, but I mean, lining them up, pastoral's probably pretty fair.
It's really, again, on us, how we interpret the market and how we apply our values. Like, it can be arable land use, like I'm aware up through tariffs, special seeds and whatnot being used.
In the mini toto.
In the mini toto, yeah, that's a good point, Ash. Yeah, and
So if you have arable as part of your pastoral farm, you consider pastoral.
it would say pastoral as a flat category. Yeah, that pastoral also includes dairy support and whatnot as well.
So you'd say but it wouldn't be enough arable to make a difference of a change anyway.
I don't feel that ain't going to be much different.
No, and if it is being no different than a specialist crops for dairy grazing, it's still a sort of it's a crop.
Canterbury's the true spot where we have significant arable properties.
That sounds
It's more on us as valuers, right? Understanding where the arable areas are and the arable properties, rather than having it categorised as arable. Talk more of that in later if you want, but time. Next slide. Great. It's just the same data, but in graph form. Again, mining, don't worry too much. We did review methodology, but it's more so we're in prep for other large gold mines if they pop up. We know what we're doing and we know how to do it, which we always do, but we've been a bit relaxed about it in the past.
So does that only affect mining? Not anywhere else around at the land values because they may have potential mining?
So it's to do with the permits and whatnot and the resources.
Yeah.
So
So that's like one active gold mine that's doubled in value, but is quite a low value base in the scheme of things anyway. So that, again, it's sort of like a little bit of a misleading statistic, but obviously there could be gold mines coming, and as they get resource consent, we'll be applying the same methodologies.
because there's a lot of exploration done 20 years ago. Does that have an effect if you've got that haven't done on your property? Only when the consent gets lodged.
At this stage, they're like the exploration, we're not worried about. There's a number of consents required to actually operate a gold mine beyond a mining permit. So it really needs to pack anything that's uncertain, that might go against public, or, that public notice period. So next slide. So it's just Same graph, but including the utility shift, so it's a bit of an outlier. Next slide. But this is our pie. This is how the different categories make up the overall number, the value of the district. So we've got residential at the largest, followed by,
Is it lifestyle?
Oh, no, it's.
Oh, we have
the
the
blue.
connection
Yeah, I know.
56. Yeah. Lifestyle's dark red. Pastoral's orange. Horticulture's yellow. The big blue. the
Oh, and the utilities.
Utilities now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. The dark blue will be dairy. And then commercial is the.
So here is percentage is a big value for a very small number of farms.
No, you got the wrong blue.
Wrong.
Yeah,
Point
it's
three.
confusing.
I see, right, yeah.
But yeah,
no.
big blue is utilities.
Yeah.
Little dark blue. Dairy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Utilities moving so far. That'll have a major impact on the rates.
Well, the rating policy does not, there's actually they have a separate rates policy with the hydro dams and contact.
Historically, we had.
Yeah, yes.
I think that's tomorrow's.
We will
discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can leave that
I
one.
wasn't going to come tomorrow, but I am now.
You should.
There you go.
We'll just move on. I'll let you guys sort that.
Getting excited.
It's land value. So hydro assets have significant value improvements or capital values, but their land values less so. So it doesn't influence the land value at the moment to the same extent. We've got the residential's big one on the left. Orange is pastoral. Bottom right is lifestyle. Yellow on the right is horticulture. Dark blue at the top left would be industrial, 2.2% of the.
You just confirm, please, what lifestyle encompasses.
Okay, so we have our own categories for lifestyle, and that's based on us as valuers, how we want to approach it. Depending on the location, between 5,000 squares and a hectare is kind of our customary point. So if we're over 5,000 squares, probably a lifestyle property. But if it's surrounded by residential, we'll probably keep it residential. And then if we go how big, it depends on the land balance. If you've got some real scrubby, horrible stuff and it's 20 hectares of it, but it has minimal value, all that money's in the residential site of that lifestyle property. That could still be a lifestyle category, but majority between 10 and 15 hectares lifestyle.
So it's,
Saying there can be outliers.
it's as big as value, pretty much as big as value, if I'm reading it right. I can't read the bottom number there. As
16.
pastoral,
No, 16.
16 compared to 23
What is a considerable
value.
it's a considerable part of the district. It's growing. Yep. Sorry.
And especially with the utilities, which made up 20% of the capital value, a lot of the utilities have zero land value and the other ones have still quite small or insignificant compared to their capital value or value of improvements basis, which is why it doesn't sort of rank in the top for the land value.
Next slide, please. By number of properties. So that's just showing how many of actual individual properties in each category. So green, the big one is the residential. Sorry, it's not the easiest one for me.
I think we can probably send them out the slides and then
Yeah,
you can have a good look through.
Slides.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
Brilliant. Saves me. So, yeah. So even though you're residential, there's a considerable number, bear in mind again with that lifestyle component. Yeah, it's creeping up.
So can you think what that would look like if we look at our projected figures going forward? That residential will close up that graph significantly with the developments that's coming down the chain.
Probably you're likely to
And
see
lifestyle.
further growth in residential and lifestyle
To the
numbers.
point where they can just about close up.
Yeah, like the way it's going, isn't it? We've got demand, there's people coming down, like a lot of North Islanders and whatnot coming in, and there's demand. So developers are going with the demand, you know,
Both with water.
and people are seeing a lot of money to be made in that developed space, you know. That's for sure. Next slide. Rizzy.
Yeah, look, there's not a huge amount to kind of talk about in any sort of super interesting capacities with residential. We did have the implementation of Plan Change 19 that has played out a little bit into definitely a little bit more strongly in the Cromwell values and sort of at a slightly more subdued level in the Alexandra market. But yeah, mostly it's that first home buyers and owner occupiers that are driving the key market change in the district. The next slide. That's just our HPI graph, but that sort of white line in the middle is the average, and it's showing that slight dip right after the last revaluation. So the market probably did come back a 1% or 2% after that time. And then it's just been a very, I say, nice, slow, steady, like if this is all we ever saw, this would be an ideal world for us, just stable with very slight growth going across. So yeah, so about an 11% increase from that bottom of that dip. And that's why we're sort of looking at that kind of overall kind of 9% where after it's come down a little bit.
You wouldn't be expecting to see any more growth, though, value growth now in the next 4 or 5 years, would you, with the...
I wouldn't say that, no. Like I personally think that the market may have already moved another 1% or 2% from our September to now. And again, it's so hard to say those overarching comments when it's certain subsections of the market. So under 800,000, really strong, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I would say the chance of population growth continuing and just, I mean, hopefully
value growth more so than population growth.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand the 800,000 because mum and dad who can probably afford a loan of $500,000, bit of equity in their property. But if you took that snapshot in the next 6 months, you could have higher interest rates in an unstable world.
Yes.
And are people speculated on Central Otago because of what you can see in the future, I guess what I'm saying?
I think, yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing about, well, we don't have to make predictions. So that's great for us. And the reality is things are changing all the time, like you say, whether it's interest rates, global uncertainty, whatever.
You sort of do.
I know even at Alex Primary School, I know my sister's daughter had a girl join their class that's moved here from America and that sort of thing. So you don't know what's going to happen. But yeah.
There are a number of sections coming in on the market. Going to have some more supply. So how's that going to be, that market dynamic going to play out with more supply coming in and a lot of older housing stock too, you know? So
it should keep things relatively.
And I guess for us, when we're going to have discussion on rates tomorrow, and we've got growth, unprecedented growth, I think, out of control. And I went to Tiana yesterday, day before, and Queenstown is growing at a point where, to me, it's looking like they could end up being a cluster. But the number of people that are traveling, number of people in Tiana and Milford, and that was phenomenal. If we get that same, my biggest fear is we aren't developing enough for the growth. I know the growth will go up in value movement because unless you've got a high paid person to get that $1.5 million, $2 million house, you've got to fund you made a lot of money somewhere.
I think that's a nationwide thing that we've always struggled to match, that being ready for whatever growth that's coming. But as Tim mentioned, there is a few things sort of in the pipeline or available that we are, I think you potentially not as in a bad position as we have been in the past. There's sort of Napara Estates, Naitahu Properties one, bits and pieces, but it's all just in the timing of that. And obviously they are in the control of the developers as well. So yeah.
But
You might be underestimating how much debt people are willing to take on to buy a house.
Yeah, and I guess the concern as you look at this government we've got now, it could be a one-term government. We could have capital gains tax, and what would it do to the growth and elevation of our predictions? My biggest fear actually is we settle to think about growth and it doesn't turn up like a lot of other regions.
Yep, and that can happen too, and that's where developers never want to, I guess, repeat the issues that we had in the GFC. They don't mass release 100 sections; they drop them 5 at a time, and that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot more agility, but I think I would say there's more chances of it going the other way than to be like it all slowing down, even though that might be the preference as well. But anyway, next slide there. Yeah, we want to keep the line stable. So we want to have that good balance between supply and demand. So through the residential, a lot of places are kind of looking around circa 5%. So Alexandra, Ranfurly, Bannockburns there as well, are sort of looking at sort of a 5%. Roxburgh saw a little bit of a stronger lift, around the 10%, and Cromwell as well was had the most growth with 10 to 15% through the key Cromwell roles. And Cromwell Rural contains Peas and Moorings, so that's what drives a lot of the value in that Cromwell Rural bracket, rather than sort of properties, although there'll be definitely lifestyle influence.
So it's up to terrace and up to Queensbury, so the smaller properties. But
So Clyde is kind of like the only anomaly here in terms of, I think the overall increase is like 0.12%. But I do want to point out for Clyde property values, there will be a large number of people that have seen a small decrease in value, and it's probably 10, 20 grand sort of thing. And that's in the older properties of Clyde that are not in the wastewater treatment, versus the stuff that's in that key kind of central to town area, and the newer stuff like Sunderland Estate, they will have seen increases, again pretty modest, and that's why you've got this average of nothing happening. But it's just kind of giving a heads up that some people might be like, my value's gone down. That is what was being seen in Clyde. And I think what's driving that is the higher value level of Clyde. It cuts out a lot of that first home buyer traffic. And as well, in this kind of cost of living crisis, there's less demand of people buying holiday homes, and probably a few more people selling them and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the Clyde story. But that central Clyde is still quite premium and showing growth as well.
So Roxburgh and Ranfurly were just speculators?
Roxburgh and Ranfurly are different markets, and Ranfurly, they sort of reported that a lot of it, they're getting a lot of senior type people buying in the town because of the hospital, and Roxburgh is getting more influence from Auckland, Christchurch, other people, whereas they're seeing
Want to
it.
go down and see the old Tom Cruise over here?
Yeah, exactly. Like the I think
Toto to die.
what they're saying is, it's part of those charms of a Central Otago experience of where they feel they've been priced out of other brackets and that sort of thing.
They also know they're well represented at the tables too, Ranfurly and Roxburgh.
Oh, great answer, Curtis. Great answer.
Probably just to note, Naseby is kind of like a little bit of a similar story to Clyde, where Naseby hasn't moved as much as Ranfurly, and that's because Ranfurly is getting more owner-occupier attraction, and Naseby is just that little bit more of that holiday home influence. So it's not as much growth there. That's the resi. Next slide. Just, sort of that table form again of sort of the key movements through there.
How come you've gone Cromwell and then Cromwell Rural, but you haven't gone that with any of the other centres?
Alexandra's got an Alexandra Rural role, which I should point out is actually like Omakau, but it also includes bits of Springvale, and it sort of goes out on its way to Omakau. And it's just the way the Cromwell Rural role will include Paris. Yeah. And it's just the way that the lines had been drawn. But we can changing role numbers for which is how they do the valuation assessment numbers is quite hard, but changing sales group thing. So Pisa Moorings will absolutely end up in its own sales group by the time we come back, and Parkburn will be the same. So whether they end up in separate ones or they'll get separated out, so it's a little bit more meaningful in the data. Commercial industrial, Tim Gibson down in Dunedin did this for us, but the long and short of it is industrial is continuing to perform strongly and sort of seeing good activity there. On the commercial front, commercial is not as rosy as industrial, and sort of I'd say there's a lot more of a mixed bag in the commercial changes to value, but all still ending up very minor. So if we go to the next slide, it'll give us sort of those key breakdowns. So the likes of Alexandra, the industrial is going up quite significantly, but that's on a very, very low base. Like Alexandra Industrial is very low, and it's significantly lower than still. So it's a big percentage change, but it's not necessarily a huge value change. Within the Alexandra, oh, that's just industrial, isn't it? Yeah, that's just industrial. And yeah, so Cromwell just sort of continuing along its sort of solid performance. They're getting really strong demand from owner occupiers in Cromwell, so they can buy a piece of land, chuck their workshop off and they don't need to pay other people's rent there. Next slide. Yeah, commercial with Alexandra, commercial is the only one that's sort of going down just slightly there. That's also like a little bit two-tier where Tarbert Street has maybe seen a little bit of a slight decline, but Centennial Avenue's actually still sort of going a bit stronger. So like a small change in relativity there. But for the most part, the value movements in commercial is pretty low. Not seeing significant increases through commercial, and there's still pressure on yields at the moment as well.
So Clyde would be restaurants, cafe type commercial businesses.
Yes, and now it's probably much more weighted to modern. So modern premises are just typically always doing a lot more strongly. But yeah, the Clyde is not many properties, but a few really good ones in there. Next slide. Yeah, over to you.
Lifestyle. So lifestyle influences the rural. So to understand the rural through the Cromwell side of the gorge, like you really have to understand the lifestyle market, because it's amenity type factors are just influencing all these properties. And we saw that through Queenstown last year, and it's just continued on. And yeah, but it's two markets basically. We've got probably Alexandra, Surrounds, and then through the Cromwell Gorge, and then through there around Lake Dunstan, and then we've got the rural kind of side of things. Now the rural side of things, which is Omacare through to Manitoto, Haeroa, etc., Roxburgh, it's pretty stagnant. You know, we lifted things a huge amount last time, and the market's just kind of accepting those values. The one thing that has had an impact is just high amenity sites amongst Central Otago landscape, like at Shadow Creek there, the site's selling 700,000, which is just mind-blowing, right? But they've got these purchases coming in that really appreciate our landscape and natural values, and they're willing to pay for it. If we go further up to Lauder, up on the hill on top of there, it's about $670,000 for a hectare site, like a vacant site in there. So, I mean, again, it's just mind-blowing. But that is where, you know,
market's there for that.
Yeah, and it hasn't really been proven in the past. People have tried to get it, and some people have got it, some people haven't. Now it seems like people are holding out and they're finding a buyer. So how much more we see of that, because no offence, your district plan on the rural is pretty relaxed. People are getting around. They're finding more and more ways of inhibiting developments and stuff where you don't want them. And I do hear a few people not being able to get it, but it seems to be if people just start throwing more money, they're going to get kind of what they want. And I mean, we're seeing that especially through the Cromwell side of the gorge. So like, I'm not throwing stones or anything because I understand. All I'm saying is that we are getting development in areas probably that wasn't perceived to be developed, you know, in the past. And so, yeah, there's protections. I mean, Queenstown's the opposite, and they're so restrictive and so hard, and it's a bit of a developer's nightmare, you know. So, I don't know, there's obviously a balance there somewhere, but yeah, it's just something that's definitely come through. Into the rural, especially through around tariffs and horrible. I keep saying tariffs, but against the Clutha River, what I'm really getting at. Quality improvements and cost to build, that's the main across the whole district, you know, good modern properties are being well reflected. That makes a lot of sense, you know, if that's what it costs you to build it, that's what you expect to receive, you know, in the market. We went through a wee downturn, 23, 24, but people just kind of held by the, you know, they didn't sell it for what they didn't think it was worth. So we never really saw a true downturn, although there might have been a little bit of a, you know, softening. But at the moment, I'd we're a fairly strong market, lifestyle wise. Yeah, next slide, please. So this is our value movement by sales group. Slide, don't worry about that, is like minimal properties that are just going up that are zoned for development, not highest and best use yet. The key ones to look at: Maniototo and Alexandra Rural operate somewhat similarly, but Alexandra Rural has a bit more influence around Alexandra, you know, so it makes sense going more. The Maniototo increases are really off the back of those high amenity sites, you know, just lifting a few properties up. Pretty subdued. Same as X2, well, X2 Peka is Cheviot and Fruitlands, and it's influenced by that Fruitlands, etc. And some of those sites against the river again.
So the Ranfurly lifestyle compared to the Maniototo would be the subdivisions going on the outside of Ranfurly itself.
Where the fuel station and stuff is. So they're with lifestyle properties within the Ranfurly.
The Allied fuel station is part of a lifestyle valuation zone.
Should we go for the next slide? Point. So there's 22 lifestyle properties in the Ranfurly roll. You know, so that's not really a good indicator of Ranfurly. Well, it's just that.
But what I'm trying to get in my head is Ranfurly and the Maniototo are the same in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But the ones around Ranfurly, there's a lot like Kieran O'Neill and those Jeff Shaw building houses on the edge of the township. Are they deemed lifestyle?
Yes, sorry, Richard. Yeah, it depends on size and zoning, essentially.
Yeah. So they could subdivide them off their property and have them on another title, and they'll be a lifestyle block for rating purposes, but the farm across the street, across the paddock is.
Yeah. It's niggly because our categories are based off highest and best use just as much as they are size, etc. So if it's been used as a farm and there's development potential but no seen development demand, might have that as a pastoral category, you know, in a group.
No, just because I would have thought Maniototo and Ranfurly are the same.
Yeah. But Maniototo includes Athens, you know, like it kind of drifts with Lauder Creek, where the boundary is across. So.
And there's no Cromwell. There's no lifestyle in Cromwell.
If there is, it'd be one property.
It's probably rural, but
Yeah, it's probably, yeah.
I think I changed it to residential just to get it out of the stats. Yeah. Yeah, so Cromwell Rural and Bannockburn are the two big ones that show the true growth of over there. Yeah, and another point about X2 Peka, it's coming off a low base, like, so the percentages kind of uniform with say Cromwell Rural and whatnot. Yeah, it's probably lifestyle in a nutshell. Next slide, it might be, yeah. But yeah, any questions about lifestyle quickly? I feel like that was a bit sporadically explained. Sorry. Yeah, rural. Okay. Again, split market. True rural around Alexandra, Maniototo, Cheviot, but starting to be influenced up and around the hills through here inside Dunstan. Some people kind of looking at development potential against the Clutha River, but it's not happening just yet. It's there, it's being advertised, getting limited interest. It might come in the next 3 years, but as soon as we get through into Cromwell and through there, we're really getting into community values. These developers are looking at these smaller blocks. We've got them classified as pastoral. They might be 80 to 120 hectares, but there is a significant premium. So there's Don Young's just recently coming through, you know, that is up behind Logan, and it kind of reflects that potential. So we're kind of balancing all these factors, and that's against the district plan zonings too. So is it straight rural? Has it got significant amenity landscape or outstanding natural landscape? So we really had to go through these properties one by one in order to assess really what they are. Same as the lifestyle, individual property approach, rather than applying any percentage. It just wouldn't work. There's just no way. Pastoral market, in general, is strengthening. We had a terrible couple of years, and commodity prices coming back, and now we're really seeing some momentum through there. I'm starting to see sales happen. At the reval date, the market was strengthening to the point that properties were just beginning to transact again, rather than any increased values, where now we're kind of looking at it saying, well, you know, things could be moving, but yet to really truly be proven. Scale. Dairy, been a consistent performer. Yeah, it's just chipping away basically. We've had a couple of big dairy sales, which we haven't had. So we're happy to have those and kind of confirm it. Numbers. Dairy support as a land use becoming a, it's probably quite complicated at the moment because it's a lower cost, lower land value district. So people can afford their own runoffs. They don't need to have specialist runoff blocks that they're doing separately. But then again, so it's just varied demand. And talking about arable, yeah, so it is changing. There's more and more going on in the district. It's not just a sheep and beef farm that's chipping away. So yeah, we'll continue to kind of watch that, especially the alternate land use options, you know, solar, etc., or just, you know, people looking at different ways to make the most out of their land too. Horticulture, land values in line with the lifestyle market and development potential. And the best way to describe it is the added value of plantings and what they actually are. There's like cherries are a great example. So what we're really looking at is our residual. We've got our site value, which is our residential component, and we have residual land per hectare. And we've got, say, cherries. You know, cherries are up 300,000-400,000 a hectare on top. We're down to roughly $120,000 to $160,000 a hectare, plus our normal rural land rate. As soon as there's lifestyle and development potential, our added value of cherries just drops down considerably to match any increase or potential. So some of these smaller blocks are really minimal. It's a very difficult market to value. We've been trying to get it right, but there is no defined answer. So we've just done best practice, you know, as we can with that market. But some of those properties are showing considerable drops.
So are they selling? Is there a market, and do they sell to give you a value, or is it just a hypothetical value?
So for the productive orchards, so the bigger ones, we've done a productive valuations to work out the values they stack up, which is stacked up with talking to other valuers and whatnot. Smaller ones, there have been a couple of sales, all kind of lifestyle type purchases. I think PGG said the last true cherry inquiry they had was in May 2024. Someone looking to buy one, and I don't know if he bought one. You know,
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. It's hard to get a value because it was a dream concept, wasn't it? Like going, you know, vineyard and making your own wine and some little sing kumbaya, but it didn't actually always work out.
They diversify with planting different varieties, but they're still cherries at the end of the day. So what is there true diversity by just planting one type of crop? You know, those mixed fruit guys that are well established, they seem to be operating, you know, they just go with the highs and lows.
I guess what you're saying is using on a valuation base, you are anticipating seeing some of those smaller horticultural sites broken into lifestyle or potentially residential.
Yeah,
depending on
the underlying zoning, but it just might see the removal of those cherries off that 2 hectare block. Sounds like the people that are in the most, well, so some of the people that are having the most problem is mum and dad that bought a lifestyle block with 2 hectares of cherries, thinking this would be a great income earner. Then just left with cost after cost. You know, no way of exiting, you know, on your buy. So yeah, definitely not a simple
Subdivision by stealth.
So yeah, my parents tried to buy one, they got denied. I thought, thank God. Yeah, but that was a good classic example. The bank required them to provide their own equity to pay the extra money for the cherries. The bank was not going to finance them.
That was another question is like all of a sudden if you had capital value goes up and you had an organic cherry farm and its value, you've got the values wrong, you'd be able to leverage on that and buy a residential house, but somewhere along it comes down to income.
You leverage off a residential house.
A lot of them who've got smaller scale, because there's some around us and we did the same, who've got smaller scale cherries are actually finding they can't sell with the cherries and they are pulling them out and then putting it back on the market with a beer paddock.
And it sells probably quite well as a beer
Yeah.
paddock, it'll sell quite quickly, we'll get the money. But it's just the thought of paying $300,000 a hectare for these cherries or I don't get the actual establishment costs off the top of my mind, but just that taking that loss, right? That's the same with mixed fruit, with apples and, undesired varieties and Ernst and whatnot. I mean, some of those blocks have just cleared it. They haven't cared. They've just said, we want to sell, this is what we've got to do, We're going to have time. We are running out.
Next slide.
Yeah. You can go to the next one. Hopefully should be a wee. Oh, go back. Sorry, I was hoping for a burger on our chat. Yeah. So 4.8% for dairy, pastoral 4.1%. But I will say that the pastoral was probably significant. I'll own up. The last time terrace we had one sale. I thought it was a high sale and I didn't chase it. We've now had more sales in terrace and we were considerably well behind sales. So some of those properties are going from 15 to 20,000 hectare up to 40,000 hectare, and they are all of considerable scale. So you've got properties going from there's water, there's development potential. You've got a heap of things going on. You've got people doing looking at dairy conversions. They've got it is an area that people are looking at for alternate land use options and land banking for the future.
Speculative industries coming in from the outside, existing operators developing.
We've got one of them's a big industrial land banker from Auckland. One of them is a specialist seed grower from Ashburton. One of them is just pending at the moment, but I think it's a large dairy operator from Culverden. So there's a big wide range of people. If I did the values on there, like I'm doing a hypothetical subdivision roughly based on splitting into 8 hectare sites, it comes out the same values that we're getting. So that's what I'm talking about, this district plan as well, so it's another indicator. Forestry doesn't really fit in Teviot basically, around Naseby, not too worried about that. Mining, we've got our methodology down packed. Any large scale mining operations, Teviot one we've figured out. We've reviewed. That's the main one that we've got at the moment.
Solar going to be on that list in time?
Yeah, we'll get to the end quickly.
Yeah. Well, then we'll.
Next slide. Objections. People have until the 24th of April to object, so they'll get notice today. I think it's the official public notice.
The mailer, it might be on the next slide.
Next slide. Yeah,
there we go.
So public notice today. Owners notice is posted next week. Last day for objection 24th of April. So we'll try and get those done as soon as we can. Last year or last reval, we only had about 151, so it's less than 1%. So if we can get that again, we'll start. We have an anomaly in probably Central Otago where people generally want them up rather than down.
Because they've been negatively geared and they need to borrow the money and get the equity from the bank.
Yeah, so it's always interesting dealing with that.
A lot of them also.
You review it against the sales that have happened, and if they've got a good argument and a good case of why the property's more, then fair enough,
It's also a lot of work done that hasn't been captured in building consents. We don't know what anyone's house looks like on the inside, so that sort of thing. So it was generally good or modest or legitimate reasons to object. And I mean, even on a good day, we kind of hope to have 80% of the values within 10% of the value at the 1st of September. That's kind of the best that we can hope for. So you're definitely not going to get them all right when there's a few niche situations going on. But Tim and I, we're working with Kelly and the team to tee up maybe a drop-in day at the library or something as well for maybe a week or so after the owner's notice have been posted, so that if people want to come in and ask us questions and get a bit more context, that we can do that as well.
Next slide, there's no more. Yeah,
That's it.
so the key things I want to get across with solar, the trigger point for solar to valuing it is the initial, the commencement of the lease to the farmer. And it's basically saying that construction's also being completed. You know, we're starting that construction phase. So we've got a big push from OVG to basically take into account the income earning potential of the lease to the farmer, just to their solar operator. That's our solar chat.
Very quick chat. I thought we had questions.
Yeah.
And then quickly with mining, once they get resource consent. So, but they need to have all these consents in place to be able to undertake it.
So go back 2 steps to the solar and then the mining. What potential relative like to subdivision, you talk about the ones in terrace, are they 6 times the value? The earning potential like my big gig with solar, right? Take the one in Ranfurly. When they're doing their we love you and we're going to be great to your community, we're talking about $1 billion, 900 million to go into your community. That's what we're going to bring to your value. But it doesn't reflect in the land value and the farmers getting a lease of 1.2 million a year.
So that's what.
It's only the same as subdividing off that block of land and putting a subdivision on the main road.
So when we review our hydro assessments and utilities, also a lead in to change our processes to review how we do these activities to ensure that it's being accounted for. So, and there was big pushback under the case, under the Rating Valuations Act, that the land value can't allow for that lease in the land value. But they've found a way in their interpretation to kind of, to demonstrate that it should be, and they've got a very good solid argument. And it's exactly what you're saying. So basically the person that's actually receiving that income, because of the resource consent, no different to a dairy. Well, it is probably different, but an example of that is dairy support resource consent, in Southland, getting more money, what's that asset truly worth because of the income earning potential.
Yeah.
So it's a long-winded way of saying what I want to say, but I hope that made sense. So income earning potential based off resource consents and whatnot should be taken into account for these specific properties. We've got to be really careful because
An anomaly in Canterbury where the dairy support unit's worth more than the dairy farm currently because there's a cap on the limit of what it's available.
Yeah, so that's basically.
similar thing, yeah. Not sure that real in particular right at the moment, but yeah, but
What's the case?
yeah, but that is the concept, yeah.
So how do you find out the earning potential of a solar farm until it's up and running and then it's too late to set a rate?
Well, man, we haven't really been privy to much information.
Well, that's the problem though, isn't it? The community's told how wonderful, same as mine, and how wonderful we're going to be. But we don't know what the actual effect on rates or the rate payer or the community, because the community sees the arsenic pond, if it wants, sort of word, or the reflective light of a solar. And they've gone out with, we're going to invest 300 million into mining, we're going to invest $1 billion into solar here, and here. But actually no one really knows the cost and whether it subsidises your rates. Because my argument is if you're going to have projected figures, you go to the drop-in centres, that should be predicted figures that you guys should be using. Well, actually, you've got to pay your valuation of that property because they pay the rates. The way I pick it up, the people I've been talking to, that the solar company pay the rate. So it's irrelevant. It's just a percentage of their profit gets shared to the community. And then we come along and go, well, actually, a rate review tomorrow, I want 7 times the general rate for a solar farm because that mitigates a loss of amenities or visual pollution or whatever you want to have to the person on the rate payer. And if you take your dams, I mean, I believe taking on the power companies and people start crying and sleep at night. But
No, I'm ready to go on.
good on you, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Do it.
It will be megawatts or gigawatts or whatever of that production that we'll be using as a base. And if we, we'll be able to work out some metrics of what we think or assume if we're not provided or we're not able to get that. But generally, I feel like you sort of can find that out, but our utility specialist is basically looking into it and is going to front foot it and say, look, it's coming. If you want it right, give us the information.
Yeah.
If you don't, we'll guess.
What I hope is that you're at the top end are okay, because if there's a whole lot, and if we wanted a district plan to slow down the growth of solar, it's a mechanism to go, well, actually, you've got to pay a fair bit of rates to that. It's going to have quite a cost to your business. Because, if it's just like you talk about, your district plan is allowing a lot of the stuff to go on without some sort of a handbrake or look at it.
OVG's fairly general. They're pretty hot on this topic at the moment, and they're really, since it's so new, they're really defining, right? They're going through they are pushing us to come up with our ways of handling it and then take it. I think it's going to be a process to get things really well here because it is so new, etc. Like it's going to take a couple of years realistically to define it specifically. Because you've got the whole country that's got the same thing that you've got going on, it's not just yet.
And yeah, there's that difference between there's the valuation methodology and then there's your rates policy to, how you want it.
We're very strictly under the Rating Valuations Act and the rules, how we can give you the data to do with what.
Yeah.
So
You won't get told off for being overvaluing your values, eh? Because like you said in Terrace, you're not getting told off because you've got your values wrong and the growth that came in the rural sector. So by saying, well, we our methodology, this is what we're the best information we've got, we think it's worth X.
No. Well,
Because you've just admitted you got that wrong in Terrace because actually the markets come to Terrace quicker than probably you thought.
Yeah, definitely. So you did right, like having the assumptions correct, that's all we can do for a start, right? Is have the best possible assumptions.
Or 20% higher than your best possible assumption. Well, it's up to them to prove that you're wrong. Effectively, because if you go,
I proved me wrong 3 years ago, Yeah, 3 years ago, I was pretty confident at the time. There's no sales.
Yeah, and I guess it's a moving, Central Target's moving a lot.
Yeah.
That valuations can go, No, that's good.
Any other final questions? Thank you. I'm sure everybody will be looking forward to those arriving in their letterbox. Probably over the 2 weeks from when you send them out because the post is.
I feel like we need an asterisk on the.
Please allow 12 to 73 days.
Vacancies of New Zealand Post.
Yeah.
If anybody doesn't receive theirs, do they just contact QV?
Yep, and they'll be available online as well. So anyone you can all go on qv.co.nz and probably look up your own value right now.
They're all. Yeah.
I don't know if they're on CODC's website live yet.
They won't be live on the website, but
Yeah.
they're loaded.
And yes, they can just get in touch and get a reissued notice if it hasn't received.
Yeah, keep us updated as to that date for the drop-in so that we can.
Yeah, we're just confirming it so that you can let people know and stuff as well.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for coming along. We really appreciate the work that you do. What we might do is, because our next session is 2 hours taking us through to 1 o'clock, we'll have a quick 10-minute break if anybody needs a cup of tea or to go to the loo or to quickly hop onto QV and check their value. And then we can listen with all of our attention to Paul next. We have got Andrew here joining us now as well. So if you'd just like to introduce yourselves and your roles, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Paul Morris and I am the Chief Financial Officer for CODC. And you may gather from the discussions, I love talking about this sort of stuff that we're going to be talking about and can rabbit on for a long time. So, yeah.
It should be enough.
I've got 2 hours today and 2 hours tomorrow. You'll be over me by then.
And I'm Donna McKeown, the board accountant. So I tend to do the monthly financial reporting to the council. It's not necessarily every month, but I do those and also the annual.
Thanks. Cool. So we'll kick off. There's a couple of things I want to talk about today that is kind of a starter for 10 for some of the supporting documents for the LTP. One of them is this next one, which is investment policy. And the next one we'll be talking about is the financial strategy. So if we kick off with investment policy, next slide, thanks, Wayne. It is a document that is required as part of the long-term plan, and it's there to provide predictability and certainty about sources and levels of funding. There's the legal reference, section 102(2)(c), and section 105 provides the framework to prepare an investment policy, and it must be adopted under section 102(1). So the points there, it should cover the mix of investments. We don't know what A was because it's been repealed, so it obviously wasn't worth worrying about. What our policy is on the acquisition of new investments, which is quite important, and an outline of the procedure by which investments are managed and reported to the local authority. And finally, an outline of how risks associated with investment are assessed and managed. I'm not proposing to deal with all of the investment policy because it's a solid policy. There's a couple of points that I want to get council thinking about in relation to the next slide, thanks, Wayne, which is we're going to do a bit of scene setting. So things have changed significantly for councils in the last 12 to 18 months. The first thing in terms of that we need to consider in our next long-term plan, given that a long-term plan is for 10 years, there is a looming rates cap coming. We don't know what it will be like, how it will be implemented, what the range is. The government have said between 2% and 4%. There are some bits that we would be thinking around. Does that include growth? Does it exclude growth? Does it include infrastructure, which we will only own as roading from 1 July 2027, because the next point, transfer of Three Waters to Southern Waters Limited, will happen. We also have to deal with simplifying local government. That's the dealing with the regional councils and the likes and how that's going to look. We've got conflicting, I would say, expectations around effectively what we can afford to deliver and what our residents are expecting us to deliver. There will be economic factors, and we've just started to feel some of those right now with the stuff that's happening in the Middle East. There will be interest rate changes, increases in costs. We have to think about how we deal with those as well. We must consider the investment policy in the light of the financial strategy. And that's why I want to do the investment policy first, because there will be a lot more discussion, I would expect, in the financial strategy. Also, land development and future sales from internally, how that happens and what happens with that. And that leads on to things like, how do we fund our capital? Given that there's potentially a between 2% and 4% rates cap how do we fund the bit above that we still really want to continue with and our ratepayers expect us to deliver? So those are all the things that we need to be thinking around in our investment policy. Because the investment policy and the income that we earn from our investments can go towards offsetting our rates and allowing us to do activities over and above our potential rate cap. And look, just jump in and ask any questions at the time if you've got them. I can see Stu was kind of thinking of one, but we'll box. I don't know if you want to say it, Stuart, then that's all good. So next slide, thanks, Wayne. We also have to think about council's priorities. Now, council had a session with Alicia Mackay pre-Christmas, and the top priority for council, with a priority weighting of 50%, was funding. So we need to take that into account. We need to be, as the council's suggested they want to do, is to be secure a fair and flexible and future-proof funding arrangements for Central Otago. So that's not necessarily just going to be in the rate space or who pays what within the rate space or user pays. That is all of our income would come into that. You want to be less dependent on rates. So that is either an increase in user pays potentially, or it is a better use of money that we receive to invest to generate other income that can be used to offset rates. You want to be able to spend and invest. They kind of, I kind of look at the invest part of it as generating investments, but you're also thinking about investing in community, what the community wants to see. So there's kind of two parts to that, I think. And better sharing costs and risks with others. And you said that you wanted to look at non-rates revenue. So find and invest new income sources. So I think it's very timely to start looking at the investment policy to try and start delivering your first priority. Have the next slide, thanks, Wayne. As I said before, I think that the council's investment policy is acceptable because it deals with where you can invest. And I'm not going to talk about those things. I think we've had some experts come through. We had Bancorp, I think, was it Bancorp, help us write the investment policy. So they've given us our limits of where we can invest, what credit ratings we can expect from the people we invest in, that type of stuff. Really what I'm going to focus on, there's two key parts to it, is our investing priorities, which is section 4. If you ever want to read the LPP, which you all should, it's on page 363 where it starts, and section 4 is on page 365. As is acceptable uses of investment funds, because I think that's where the key now starts to sit. What do we do with this money that we get? So move on to the next slide. Thanks, Wayne. So our current investing policy says that we can, our priorities are disaster relief funds, working capital and contingency liquidity. Look that up because I've hadn't heard those terms before. But it's basically saying we just need to have enough cash on hand in case of emergencies. So we also look at capital expenditure that meets our goals and strategic plan criteria. We also want to be able to repay debt and internal loans. Now, we pretty much cleaned up the internal loan situation when we districtised our rates and moved to a broader approach. So all of the internal loans were pretty 4.2 million of them, I think, yeah, was dealt with on the 1st of July as part of the districtisation program. diversify investment portfolios where appropriate. So what that's basically saying is that we don't want to be lumping all of our money into one thing. So we need to spread the risk. And financial instruments are diversified in term and institution. So we're not putting our money all in one space. Next slide. Thanks, Wayne. This, I think, is the really critical part is what do we actually use our investment for? Yeah. What are we going to use them for? So we've got interest and income. So we said that we would use it to reduce rates, i.e. we would pay for OPEX costs. We said we would also use it for CapEx and one-off projects. We would add to capital to increase the ability to fund, for the fund to meet its intentions. We reinvest that and we would put it into disaster relief. I'm not seeing any major issues with that. The only thing is that we're not doing those things not as well as we should, but we're not actually thinking a lot about those in relation to our investment funds, as far as I can see. We're actually looking at point number 2, which is capital and one-off projects. And I've got a wee bit of an issue with that, given that if we take, say, land, we sell land, we then put it into a capital project, can only sell the land once, and the capital project may not return income, and you would have lost that opportunity. So I think that we need to have a different thought process around, for argument's sake, land sales. What we should be doing is saying, let's take the interest, because we're talking interest here, but the next page talks about capital expenditure as a one-off. And I think that we should be looking at using the income from sale rather than the sale itself to fund capital. Because as I say, once you've spent it, it's gone, and you transfer from an income earning opportunity to not. Certainly there are good reasons for doing it, but I think that's actually then a funding issue rather than a conceptual.
There should be a limit on land sales.
Sorry?
There should be a limit on land sales.
Well,
because effectively what you could run the risk of, and this table's been okay, is you have inefficiency or specialists that hope and just, land sales will fix it.
Yes, and that's the type of thought process that I'm suggesting we need to stop and rejig out how we do things.
Yeah.
Because, and that was prevalent more in the ward-based system, because the wards who had, who could sell land could then do something in their space. We've now moved to a district-wide system where the district as a whole funds whatever project you're looking at. So the district should decide, and this is where the council comes into play. The council would decide how it wants to fund something. So what it's looking at, and it also has to be cognizant of this intergenerational equity thing. So you sell land now, you use it on a project now, you've actually disadvantaged future generations of the income earning capacity of the money that you would have got. You've also lumped the cost, or if we took Cromwell Hall, you would say there's a contribution of debt that is going to be paid off by land sales. That does have an impact on the current ratepayers as well as the future ratepayers. So I think we need to stop thinking about, we've got a pot of money, let's use it on this, which was prevalent pre-districtisation, to more of a, would we do this project if we didn't have that money, and let the project stack up on its own merits rather than we've got some money here, let's go and spend it.
And I guess the other thing, if you take investment policy, do we have other than yourself, you two, who runs our investments? Because we run our parks and we run our road infrastructure, but actually the funding mechanism starts there. So do we have a property develop, Gareth, go, well, actually, you need reduce for us 9% return on the property you've got, and then we can invest at 4% in offsetting rates. Because we're going, oh, well,
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's where we're getting to, because we've not previously been in that position, and we're talking about establishing potentially an investment vehicle as opposed to we've got $20 million because we've sold $20 million worth of land. What are we going to spend it on? And to grow that and become something that we haven't previously done.
And I guess the question that have we got staff within here capable of running that?
I think we do. Running a treasury function as a basic treasury function, which we don't necessarily do now because it's disjointed. I think that it would take a change of thought to say that, okay, our objective now is to maximise our income earning ability, be it through investments via interest, be it through investing in property that generates a long-term rental, because the objective of the game here is you need to be able to generate long-term revenue streams, because that's what you said in your priority. You want to look at other revenue streams. So you need them to be longer term. So it might be rentals or that type of thing.
Which has been a change in the dynamic of how we used to think about things, A, because the rate caps come in, and B, because now we've got debt.
Yep.
And we've got large chunks of capital value that we can leverage off. And I guess find a mechanism to leverage off. And admittedly, and while we've had valuation, things are changing a lot. People are highly geared now, where traditionally in the last 40 years, you wouldn't have had the high gearing and there wasn't the need to be looking at that.
Yep.
But, that's good.
So just on that, you mentioned the running a treasury function. That's a permitted activity for a council to do? That's fine. Okay.
Yep. And it might be the treasury function would be dealing, we would need clear parameters from the council as to what you want to achieve. Now, if you wanted to go further, you could, and some councils do set up investment companies, CCOs, to handle that. There's a cost associated with that. It used to be a benefit when there was a tax benefit. CCO used to pay, councils didn't, so you got the imputation credits coming across. Not so much an issue now. And some councils are dismantling their holding company their holding company things. So, look, I think even more of a focus on what you want us to earn as an overall rate of return on the investments that we make would be useful, because then what we're actually doing is that we're focusing more on generating those longer term revenues. And I think that would then focus council and staff on my project I would have funded from land sales. Should it now be funded from this other space, because
the only problem with thinking like we are now, which you'd argue we should have been doing 10 years ago, is we might have amalgamation. So how do we go when we set up an investment where we're doing the right thing, we're generating income to offset rates, and then we get picked up or put into somewhere else?
Yeah, look, I'm kind of, from a financial perspective, I'm not worried as much about that, because what will happen will happen. If we do nothing, someone will come along and we might end up as a giant region. They will take over and do what they want to do anyway.
Yeah.
So
that's the worry.
Both ways, just from you. Both ways.
Well, as long as your second wife's not broke. But I mean, that's when we get forced to go to Queenstown.
Yeah.
And they haven't got the capital, we lose.
It doesn't change because you've got to go anyway.
Yeah.
So do you take the view that you spend it before the ship sinks?
No, I'm taking the view that this is the way we should be doing it, and prove that but how you tie it to, it's a bit like the mining royalties, that we tied it to the district of Central Otago District Council of the standing of that day. Now, I'm not, and it would have to, that's up to you and the top of the table is how we negotiate that in a regional deal going along.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So we've got to be, all I'm saying, I love this attitude, is like, well, let's take 12.5% return. Even if we borrowed the money from the government to invest it in Gear Avenue and sold the residential and lease them out and whatever, there's plenty of opportunity. And of that 6% of that fund can go into new developments.
Yep.
And should we be having a conversation at some stage regarding land sales versus retaining those lands and leasing it as opposed to selling it?
Exactly, that is exactly the point. It's whether, I mean, you butt up against the market where the market says, no, we want to own the land.
Yeah.
So, you then have a chance
Still the
to.
value to us on the long, and retaining the land and leasing it as opposed to.
You will always get better returns out of leasing it than you would investing it in the bank. So
And also, I know councils by nature are risk adverse, but then actually doing the development ourselves and retaining the ownership, and then, because that's the only real asset we can actually improve is the land, the limited land that we actually own.
Again, and I think then what you would need to do, and I don't know whether we've done that, Gareth, in the past, but what you would do is you do your present value calculation and say, right, if I started it now and I could sell it for 12 million, as opposed to receive 15 million in 5 years' time, for argument's sake, and I've got all these costs, what is the better thing for me? Is it better for me to take the 12 million now and invest it at whatever rate I can get? Or is it better for me to fund the development and you will receive a higher amount of money, but I guess you're getting it later. And then the question is, would it be more valuable for me to receive it now than into the future? So those are the types of things that we would be looking at.
You're going to make more by getting it now.
You should be looking at those types of things.
Yeah.
So, and if it comes to the point, we decide that we're going to lease land for argument's sake, you will always earn more money through leasing land than you will by putting it in the bank.
So you're saying that our policy, the government policy, we're able to take that investment on like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
At rating level, we can't.
You already own the land, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the land is yours. It's not like you're speculating on land ownership, because you are entitled as a council to own land.
So when the ratepayer says, council leasing this land, they're going to do this and they're going to do that, it's like they're going, well, I'd rather just sell the land, take the. We've got to deal on the other side of it as well, right? I mean, I'm in your camp 100%.
But leasing it also increases the return for future generations.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And it guarantees it.
And if you look at the capital value growth that's going to happen in Cromwell over time, that land is going to double in the next 10 years, and the best investment the council's ever made. But that's not how Susan down the road sees it. She sees her rates going up 6%.
But having said that, you around this table are elected to make those types of decisions. And as long as the numbers stack up, whatever decision you make is fine. So I guess it's setting a new way of thinking for a start, and then talking about what you want to achieve out of that. And then we come along and that's where we come in and say, right, if it means that project there would have been funded out of land sales because it was geographically, that's where it's located. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to take those land sales and we are going to invest them, but we're going to borrow to undertake the project, because there's the intergenerational side of things where we want future generations to pay their fair share and not effectively get a free ride from you are selling a piece of land that you then do not own.
Sure.
And you cannot, they're not making any more, and you can only sell it once. So you get the asset and the future generations are not necessarily paying their share towards it.
And I guess the downside to that is if you look at the developers that are coming here to the speculative growth of being here to make their margin, are we tracking that money? And the more we work harder to look after Jane and Bob and Susan down the road with their 3 kids, the more we're subsidising their capital growth. And I guess that's a mechanism, and it's the same as gold mines. Let's invest that fund in a future fund, which will go into investment. Because the more we become efficient, the more services we get, the more we're subsidising the development.
Yeah.
And that may be, I spoke on the radio yesterday, we're a council, we're only growing. But we're positive in trying to do things for the region, the ratepayer and everyone else. And it's starting to show now, but we've got to make sure that we capture the added value down the road. We can only do that through rates or development contributions or investments of our own.
Yeah, and I think it's a change in thought that's right at first principles is should one asset be liquidated to pay for something else, or should we, given that we're going into a different economic climate, should we be actually saying, well, that's got to stand on its own and we want to invest this to earn money, which is I come back to the priority that council has 50%. So it's your biggest priority. You want other income streams. And you want a less reliance on rates. So we would need to develop a policy around that.
So what it comes down to is can you lease a parcel of land for better than the local government finance borrowing rate?
Effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
An argument in our environment would be a pretty good argument. Say yes.
But if you can't get more than 3.5%, or what are we paying at the moment? 3-4%.
Yeah.
On then we shouldn't be doing what we do.
Yeah.
But I think it's a focus on the importance of the treasury side of it, rather than we've got money, let's spend it. So next slide, thanks, Wayne. Which is really what I was talking about. Investment policy allows us to spend it on capital expenditure, one-off projects, disaster relief, and I think that's really important that stays because it is something that will help trigger the government's contribution. I think it does.
I was going to ask about that because you could do two things there. If you did have a big disaster, you're going to be picked up with civil defence or the government.
Yep.
And if you did have too much in there, they'd say, well, you got your own money to fund it. The government's not going to fund it. But you'd also, if you had a major event, you could borrow for it through your investment fund.
Yeah, well, my understanding what the government, what triggers them is, and we're talking significant events here, your ability to stump up your 40%. Now that can be through borrowing capacity, that can be through liquid assets that you currently have. But you've got to have that ability. I think the government will always step in with their amount of money.
So how much is that disaster relief now? $500,000?
No, so that's probably more on the $2 million space.
Yeah.
So, but it could be tagged and put in the investment fund to be tagged.
Absolutely.
Exactly that, and that 2 million sitting there can be invested at 9%.
Yep. And the last one we've got there is debt repayment. Debt repayment to me goes against this intergenerational thing. We borrowed the money for repayment over time. If we repay it now, then the future generations are getting that benefit because it's been paid for and they don't have to fund it.
Yeah, and you'd argue the revaluation, the amount of value our land is going up and the growth that's going up, and inflation, debt will look after itself.
Yeah, well, I've got that. I want to talk a little bit about that. So it should, next slide, thanks, Wayne. And these are the things that we have. I think we've already kind of discussed these. These are your priorities. So these priorities will lead to the following next changes, I think, Wayne, if you can move to the next one. So I think we move from selling land to fund capital and one-off projects and debt repayment. There is an exception. We already have agreed to Cromwell, the hall. Council has borrowed money as a kind of a bridging finance, and once some of the industrial land is started to be sold, that will be repaid by that. And that was agreed. So that's in, as far as I'm concerned, in concrete. We won't change that. But anything going forward, anywhere across the district, should be thinking about how we can generate revenue to give effect to priority one. That's really what I'm talking about.
Goes to Curtis's comment the first time he came here is like, we should be a joint venture in some of these gold mines.
Yep.
Share solar.
Yeah. So it will also give effect to the harmonisation of rates. So that districtisation process that we've done, that helps with that. And it definitely helps with the intergenerational component of what we're supposed to look after.
Paul, how does that, when most of the land is endowment land and the laws around endowment land are quite strict, where that money from any future sales of that land has to be placed. The process, yes, there is a process to free that up, but that's quite complicated, and whether there's an appetite around this table for that. My colleagues from Cromwell will probably have a differing opinion than the rest of us. Does that, if that endowment land is then leased, can that money then be spread across? No, it still has to be.
However, I'm glad you said this.
Good segue.
It is a very good segue. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had a bit of a thought around how the endowment land itself, how that could be used. So we've asked the lawyers, and we've come back, they have come back with an opinion on this. If we sold the endowment land and invested it and used the returns that we get from the investment, we can and we are allowed to fund OPEX in the Cromwell Township. Given that OPEX in Cromwell Township, it directly benefits the Cromwell residents because their rates are subsidised by the interest. So it complies with the terms of the endowment, which is for the benefit of the Cromwell town. It also has a secondary benefit because we are districtised of reducing everybody else's rates.
That's the benefit. Yep.
So we have a mechanism to actually keep the endowment intact, be it inland or in investments, and use the income that we generate from the land or the investment to benefit directly the Cromwell ratepayers by paying, for argument's sake, the new halls operating costs. We can pay for the Cromwell Parks and Reserves operating costs. Any of those things that sit and are for the benefit directly of Cromwell public toilets in Cromwell, the operating costs of that, can be used by the council through the endowment fund. So what we're actually doing is we do not need to change the terms of the endowment. We are using the income
In Cromwell.
directly in Cromwell, and that is a secondary benefit of everybody else's rates reducing at the same time.
Question to that is, why do we districtise? If that's the case, we could have done it anyway.
Oh, you needed to districtise to do that.
You needed to do.
The benefit, if you hadn't districtised, the benefit would have had to remain in the Cromwell ward. Because you've districtised and you've got, you know, we have the swimming pool in Cromwell, we have a swimming pool in Alex. What we're saying is the Alex ratepayers are paying towards the Cromwell pool.
Yeah, so
If we have sufficient funds to offset the rates required in the Cromwell pool, only the Cromwell pool.
yeah, it takes interest.
It reduces
Takes
the
it out
rates
everybody else.
and it reduces it for everybody. It only works if you have harmonised your rates across
So
the district.
in that model, that would come under the investment policy model, where actually you'd have to work on how to get that money invested in Cromwell to get a better net return to the rest of the district.
I think, yes, and what you would say is you would say that in your investment policy that effectively you would ring fence the money that you receive. And it's not just Cromwell endowment land, it's endowments across the district.
Mm-hmm.
You can do the same thing for those endowments, assuming that they're broad enough to allow for, you know, the Cromwell district. In Cromwell's case, Maniatoda have their and we have theirs. Though, you know, depending on what those endowments say, you can take money that you earn from those investments and use them in the space that they're supposed to be used. Quite cunning, wasn't it?
While still protecting the
While
original.
still protecting the endowment.
Yeah.
So you are actually fulfilling the terms of the endowment. You cannot, and I tested this with the lawyer, you can't turn around and say, we'll take that money and we'll put it into, you know, we're upgrading Molyneux Stadium, for argument's sake. That benefits the Cromwell ratepayers because of the rates being districtised. It also benefits the rest of the district. The money needs to be spent in the area of endowment. So as long as we have, and we can isolate the costs associated with that. So we can tell you what the swimming pool costs in Cromwell. We can tell you what the new hall is going to cost us going forward. And then what you do is you build your investment policy around, here are the endowments, they can only be used in this space for these things. And you can do that. That would then flow into your revenue financing policy, it would flow into your financial strategy and ultimately your long-term plan and your rates. And it will give still be giving effect to the endowment. So, yeah.
So you've got an investment line for Cromwell via endowment on one investment line.
Yep.
And because when you take a lot of our land, I'm just thinking, like, we made a loan to the Ranfurly Hospital, which is a commercial business that makes a profit. We should be getting a share of it out of that. Same sort of thing. It should be a net contributor to our rates.
So that it achieves what you're trying, what I think council wants to achieve in terms of less reliance on rates, still maintains the endowments, not just talking about Cromwell, but all of the endowments in place. And it would be very difficult to argue that you would be against the rates reduction in your area that has a secondary flow-on effect, because, you know, if you argued that, then you end up with a stranded fund because you can't use it on anything else. So those, yeah, and we just received that opinion yesterday. We've been working on that Saskia for a couple of weeks.
So what we've got less is just reliance on rates. That is the key mechanism of how we pay for things. And now we're going to be capped at 4%. That's not even an argument anymore, because we can't put rates up to pay for future proofing anyway.
That or a reduction.
What would happen, going back to the original question, if we had leased the property out, that effectively would be the same as interest. So we would take that money and use it to offset rates in Cromwell, or no, sorry, we would use it to offset rates for an activity in Cromwell. So it might be the hall, it might be the pool, it might be the parks and reserves, whatever. So you can still do that. You're still maintaining the endowment.
The same thing if you'd become a commercial landlord with a building on endowment land, the lease that you receive would also be captured in.
And I'm not sure whether there would need to be an apportionment, because depending on how you funded the building versus the land part of it, but that
might only be 80%.
Work that out.
Yeah.
But there would be a portion that would be, if the district paid for it, that would be district funds.
So in the investment part, that'll be a major part of their whole investment portfolio policy, dealing with the endowment land and how it represents the community.
Yep.
Before we get an outside external funding or whatever. So that could be a big change.
Yep. So, great segue. I was wondering where I was going to fit that in, but so if we move on to the next slide, we're nearly done the investment policy. So what I've proposed for you to consider, and you don't have to decide today or even give direction today. I always think that, you know, land sales should be invested to return income, because again, once it's gone, you lose that opportunity. I think that you need to future-proof the investment. Therefore, I've suggested 10% of the revenue earned should be reinvested so that you're maintaining its growth, it's inflation-proofing it. At least 50% of the remainder should be used to offset OPEX. And the remainder can be used for OPEX, CAPEX or other projects, and that should be a that, not a hat, that will generate future income streams. So we're not averse to saying use the income to do a capital project, but not all of it. So there is a benefit because you would probably put rates in there at some stage. So really you're kind of offsetting your rates at the same time. So that's the kind of thing that I'd be sort of suggesting. The percentages, I think the key one is the 10%. You should be putting 10% per annum back into your investment so that you maintain its inflation proofing it.
And that investment vehicle could carry investment from all four boards in the same, but it would be within that ring fenced as to what money needs to go into which area.
So in that investment group, does it have to come back to us or does it become an investment? Then you set up a subgroup within your finance team and they just run the investment, we get a good return, we've had a 16% return on investments because
I think there's two parts to that. If it was that type of system, that would be fine. We could deal with that in the finance team. If we were looking at investing in things that are outside of, there's been talk about putting solar panels at Bannockburn. That's something that we don't necessarily as council have the ability to do, and we're probably not good at that type of thing. An investment vehicle would probably be the way to go, where they deal with those types of investments. If we were going to, say we were going to buy into fibre because we see a return there, we can isolate that through a CCO and let them do it. And then what you would do with the CCO is you would turn around and you would say, you need to return to us a 10% dividend every year. That's all we're concerned about. They have to go and generate it.
Why would we go it alone with CCOs? Why would we not, as council, partnerships instead? With the commercial sector to do it, get the technical know-how and they enable us.
Yeah, the issue for us is that we're not fast at acting on these things. We have processes that we have to go through, public consultation, etc. Whereas if we created an investment vehicle who could do that on our behalf,
that's the question I want to know.
They could. You would set that up in their constitution and their statements of expectation, etc. would be dealing with how you want these things to happen and who you want them to be dealing with.
Yeah.
But they're much more nimble than.
How do you report that to us, or you don't need to come to us? I guess the issue is if you've got something like fibre, you go, look, this is a really good deal, we're going to get 12% return year on year on year. Do we have to go back to council and I don't think it's a good idea and we get a better investment, we did Gear Avenue again and it becomes slow and muddling. Like if your group or your investment mechanism was there, have you got enough teeth to make it work and make the investments, I guess? You don't really want it to keep coming back.
There, I guess that one of the reasons that people set up CCOs for this purpose is that, you have to have a board, get specialists on your board who know what they're doing. And I'm not saying you guys don't know what you're doing. They are professional directors, and that's why I'm saying there's a cost associated with this. Yeah. But they're professional directors, and it is and you chief executive, and it's their responsibility to deliver what you have asked for as a shareholder. That's you're a shareholder effectively. So if you're saying shareholders, we want a 10% dividend, they are expected to deliver a 10% dividend. You may want to limit where they invest because you can do that. Or you may turn around and say, we'll run it like KiwiSaver Super Fund where they have a 50% balance, 20% growth, that type of thing. But that's entirely up to how you want to run it or how the parameters you want to set around it. they would then be expected if the transfer of, land and assets that we would expect them to deal with.
If we did that, when would we start? After the hall's finished?
No, you'd need to run that through a consultation process because you have to consult to create a CCO.
Well, but if we didn't have to consult and do a CCO, we wouldn't have to consult, correct?
If we did that ourselves,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Follow every decision you made if you
Yeah.
did. The
Or
CCO.
isn't that a bit dangerous as well? If we're setting from a the point of view of setting from the council saying, well, we want 10% return. Isn't that what happened with Aurora when the council,
Yeah.
they said, we want this,
So they
and then they
borrowed.
underinvested
Yeah.
and,
Absolutely,
and it ended
absolutely.
up a mess. So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, setting we want a return is not necessarily the best way to go.
No, and that's a good point, I mean, and people do borrow to supplement the return that they have to pay as a dividend, absolutely, which is not a good thing. And I think Freezing Works in Mosgiel did that. They paid that out. That was in the 90s, I think. I can't remember the name of it, but so they were borrowing to keep the dividend up. There's a risk in that. However, it gets audited, and you can set the parameters that you want. So, and I haven't thought about what those parameters might be. I'm just suggesting that we need to change how we think around these things.
And if we did go down the road of doing it ourselves, there'd be only 3 or 4 projects that we'd be starting with anyway. Like with the endowment land offset.
Yeah.
The running of the hall or investment of endowment land, and then you've got the normal commercial real estate that we've got that's open to the rest of the council. It's just whether we've got the appetite for an investment policy to change the way we look at doing business.
Yep.
Okay?
So this is a workshop, obviously. So if we wanted to adopt this type of policy, what would the process be?
So what would happen is if you are comfortable, you would say to us, along the lines that we've discussed, go away and develop a policy. We would then come back to a formal meeting. We may come back to another workshop and say, have we got what you said? And you might make tweaks or you might say, yeah, that's it. We would then put that to a formal council meeting. And it would become part of the long-term plan process.
Because it seems to me that it all sort of fits in very much with what we discussed actually in December. The parameters that we actually set then. So,
So this would be tied to the consultation of the LTP?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's all part of that LTP process.
Yep.
Do you anticipate that in putting together that policy, you'd receive outside expert advice?
We would use Bancorp, who helped us produce the first one, the one that we currently have. And as I say, I don't think there's a lot of, well, depending what you want us to do. If you're saying go away and create a CCO, then we would use Bancorp. If you're saying, we want to put more emphasis on the treasury functions, we would come up with something that would enable that to happen. And it would be we would have to consult with people like in the property team because they generate the revenue. What are we going to do with the revenue that's generated and how does that sit over the time periods that we're talking about? So
I think I'm guessing, but I'm happy to hear otherwise, that there's a general consensus that what we're looking for is something that is secure and stable along the lines of what KiwiSaver providers have, as opposed to us trying to run our own hedge fund where Curtis sits behind a desk 5 hours a day tweaking numbers and selling stock.
Go with that option. I'll do that.
Gonna be your job in your retirement.
Whatever you may have, it's a vehicle that diversifies the funding stream.
Be the value of the leasable assets of Central Otago District Council, like the combined, whether it be endowment block and other assets. What would
Yeah, that's a little bit difficult to navigate at this point in time, but just to give you an example, our commercial leases currently can generate just over $1 million a year. So, you know, if you look at it in that respect, so you're talking about seed funding, so we're selling some land now to seed fund the whole development. And once we get into that realm, then considering how much are we retaining. And then there's a different way to retain it. You can lease the land, you can develop the land and lease that. So you obviously one's capital intensified, but you get a better return. One's just a land lease.
One thing I've been thinking about recently is some of that leasehold land, some potential developments we could do, looking at Deer Avenue. One of the problems this council has is attracting staff. One of the reasons staff not finding it attractive to come to Central Otago is because of housing costs. Back in the good old days when the police used to build police houses and had teachers' houses, well, does council now consider is investing in some accommodation to make this a more attractive place to attract staff? I mean, that's
Everything's an option.
I mean, that's something I'd like to. I'm taking this as an opportunity to put it on the table for consideration, because we're talking about a financial return from some of our land endowments, but then there's that social return too that could be a benefit. And okay, it's not a dollar figure, but it is a return on that investment, and it is measurable because it could possibly solve some of the problems we have in retaining staff. Attracting
The person on the street's going to go, we wanted to offset our rates. They're not going to, the person on the street,
Yes.
they've shifted from Auckland to Christchurch to Cromwell and now pays rates. They want to cut in their rates.
Well, maybe not those people, because they're probably paying less rates than they were in Auckland. and
Yeah,
Christchurch.
but then definitely
I mean, I guess, yeah, I know what you're saying.
developed community out here and some of the problems that we have as a council, meeting the administration of the growth which is going on is you know, in fact, we can't get engineers. We can't get planners.
Well, I've got a question for Andrew. Is this, you've been battling in the same with Charlie and Bob, you know, when you went out to talk to the ratepayers, is this something that you thought we'd be having discussions about? And is it the right thing for us to look into offset rates to invest? Because it's new for what you probably thought council was doing. I mean, is it the right? I think it is. If we can build a nest egg up, and I've even had that discussion about gold mine royalties. Put them in a pot, make an investment mechanism. Is this something that when you go home tonight, going, oh, these guys are forward thinking, and that's what we should be doing, or we just bang the rates out at 4% and then cut the costs on the libraries or whatever we do? I mean, is this the feel? Is this what you're being told by the people when you got elected?
It is. It's there was certainly talk about. You talk to people say, oh, they're looking for other ways of making money other than rates. Everyone goes, how? What do you mean? I think that people that's a big void at the moment, and this gives you an indication of what that void could be. Yeah, you fill it. But yes, this is quite exciting. Yes, you've got a lot of asset there. How do you utilise the asset? Make some money. I like the idea of it doesn't go into one-off projects and just get sucked up. Like if I gave Curtis' family a divvy for the farm, it's just gone. The money's gone forever.
Curtis, you playing the new pair of money sunglasses.
Well, you've got an investment job.
Having something feeding it every year as well. It's a process of
You don't sell the families.
Oh, many people do.
I know, but and it's and I think we've seen it at the national level, and anyway, the minute it's gone, you regret it.
Yeah.
You can sell the family silver, provided that you invest the silver back into gold.
Yes.
Well, there you go. But so good. So Andrew, here's a challenge for you. Like, so when you go home tomorrow and you go biking and say, well, and tell the ratepayer, what are you going to tell the ratepayer? Like, I guess that's what we've got to sell. So someone's heard that they're investing in a property in Cromwell, and I think it's wasting money to that. But I guess we've got to somehow tell the ratepayer we're trying to do the right thing to offset their rates.
I think they're interested. How do we pay for fixing water pipes, keeping sewage running, and not increasing rates a lot more? They don't necessarily want rates to come down. They don't want to see big bills come in or big one-off hits in their rate bill, or the pipes collapsing. That's more concerning than rates going up.
Also run the risk of the money being used to fund council projects, like I'm not saying fund the building or anything of it, but the costs, the ongoing costs. I don't see as how, if it does that, it could get to a stage where it funds a lot of things within council, but there won't be any seen reduction in rates go to the community.
But it won't be a rates reduction.
No, but it won't do any relief.
But you get more for your money.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're fundamentally talking about, is that we're at a point where either we find additional income streams so that people can continue to enjoy the services they currently have, or they have less services.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
So just when we were at the LGNZ, and I can't remember the name of the council, that's gone from my head. I've got it written down somewhere. One of the councils they trialled a reduction in services in relation to what the rates cap would look like, and their community went up in arms. So, you know, if that was just trying to apply 4% rates cap and what reduction would look like. So unfortunately, we are all very used to having services provided. If you knew you weren't, I mean, we talk about libraries and swimming pools, but imagine if you found out that essentially your water was cut off for, you know, half a day, 3 days a week, because they just didn't have the ability to, you know, I mean, I know that's a silly kind of example, but
it might be that your bins don't get collected as often. There's no public bins. There's less public toilets. There's, you know, those big things of actually you've missed the one public toilet in Alex and you've got to drive to Roxburgh to get the next one.
Yeah.
Make.
So there's a lot of things like that, and that's the way we are now. It just
all in David's there.
I've told you when you started on those bits.
But I mean, I look at those figures before from QB, and I look at the growth that's happening. When I went to town the other day, we don't want to be the cutting services type people. We want to be a clever council, smart, ahead of the field, opportunities, and out of that, all the rest of it will fall. The professionals will come, and the housing it may be. If you look at retirement home, like our council building, we're talking about getting rid of the council building around Philly and putting retirement flats in there, which we could be getting a net return to the ratepayer and providing affordable houses at the other end of the house scale. Like there are opportunities, and Gear Avenue is probably one that's going to leave a lot of money behind. But, you know, maybe we should be renting those apartments instead of selling them. You know, look at that as a layer, one floor, let floor set 3 or whatever, one section should be rentals that allow young people to rent our council buildings and keep a share of it.
Surely that's got also a double benefit, hasn't it? Because it's got a benefit because we're providing actual, you know, housing at a reasonable rate. We're actually getting a return on it as well, and we're actually not increasing the rate, you know, rate.
And you're getting an economic return and you're getting a social return. Because we always get locked into the thing about it's always the dollar, which is, you know, so the thing is the economy stupid, but we have a role as not only as managers of money, but also of supporters of people too. So we need to try and find that balance and exactly that, you know, with the struggles that young people have getting into housing, it's those other models that we could be looking at, you know, leasehold land, leased, you know, rental accommodation or whatever. There's a lot of things we could be doing, which we're not.
Remember we looked at that with COVID, essentially, how do we want to be in 10 years? It's like we want to be exactly the same as we are now, what we've got. The risk is if we're not careful, we'll lose facilities, we'll lose services. It's the same thing it was 8 or 10 years ago. So,
in answer to your first question, Martin, when you were asking about housing for staff, attract people, that's a key consultation item. If everybody
yes,
right? Yeah. That's the main item. The flow on effect is we would generate income. Now we obviously, but that's what you would be consulting on if you wanted to do that. It's the same with using some, keeping some of the sections back from Gear Avenue for argument's sake and developing them ourselves. The key consultation item is we want to provide affordable housing. There is benefit.
And I think, you know, I would love to see something like that.
Yeah.
We do have scheduled in a workshop, the Queenstown Charitable Trust is coming to speak to you about the potential opportunities around social investment in housing within our district.
I'll wrap this one up. There's one more page. It's been really good discussion, so I think we'll probably need to come back once we've formalised some of the ideas. But I'm getting a general sense that you're pretty keen to look at some form of, even if it's a basic treasury function, that we can start generating some longer term revenue streams from, rather than spending it as we get it type of thing. What I'd also suggest is that you look at debt repayment. It should be a lower priority because you've got harmonisation now across the district, and you are actually benefiting future generations at almost at the expense of the current generation. So you can use the investment income to repay debt rather than use the investment itself to repay debt. And that's in that second 50% of the 90%. 50% of it could go through to debt repayment using the income rather than the capital or principal.
The capital value of our asset and the land of which we have, which the majority of it will well and truly look after the debt.
The other thing, a couple of figures is not on here. I did a bit of an exercise. We are showing a net minus 27% rates reduction with Three Waters moving off in 2027, 28. If you take off the Three Waters stuff, it's actually it's just a smidge over 10% increase for everything else. So this is kind of assuming a little bit more importance than just the 4%. The government are going to be asking us to start moving to this rates cap. We're not going to be able to, the first year of the LTP is right now for everything excluding Three Waters sitting at 10. Just a smidge over
When you
10.
say the government's going to ask us to move, who's the government? Is it
Currently, they've said we're expecting councils to start moving towards that. There's no legislation that forces you to do that.
And
any potential new government have said that they're not going to change what's already
so
been
what's the
announced.
penalty if we don't? And that's the other question.
I don't
There's
know.
a couple of years, isn't there, in the transition they've talked about before it's imposed.
Yeah.
But I think the minister made the comment he would expect that councils would start moving towards that. But I think the deadline would be 2 years after 2027, so 2029 or something like that.
So
Then you'd
if we
have to
took
be-
the 10% that you're talking about now and we cut it back to 8.2, we're showing a directional move away from where we are anyway. And
That was around, they didn't want people to say, oh gosh, they're going to be 4%. So we've got to put our rates up 30% for the next 3 years so that we're at a better base to go to 4% from. So that was why he said you
We've
need
done
to
that
start
a few
moving
years ago.
towards that.
But it's just an interesting
the
thing.
lift have come behind us.
Yeah.
We're actually on the trajectory of.
Well, I would say, are we having? And I don't want to say that you might, Stuart. You were saying let's bang it in at 7.5. I remember you saying that. The rates increase in the first year of the LTP, if I have time to work it out, would be higher than the 10 because it's lower this year, next year.
Yeah.
So the step from there to there is going to be more.
So I was right, bang it in there.
Well, I wouldn't want to say that in public. I guess what I'm saying is that we start looking at this investment policy sooner rather than later is going to help with those types of things.
And any services we did have to cut to meet any threshold, we would hope that we cut them in services that we could pick back up when we might have got savings or the investment model came in. Like I said, a calendar service, and we could put it on a slow burn for a while, whatever that may be. We're upgrading a pool or doing something on a bridge or a road or whatever. But as long as we have a slowdown where it feels like it needs to be, and if the investment model comes in and we have our growth projections or we have, our rate review picks out some money from whatever, then we can actually bring that back into play. That's a real risk of slash and burn, as you burn a facility that you realise you made a mistake of.
But again, that's a decision that council would need to go through, and we hope to be able to put that in front of you in terms of our budget discussions so that you can think about how that might play out.
Broaden our thinking.
Thank you for that one. Now we'll move on to the next one.
Fun one.
Yeah, yes and no. I find them all fun. It's been a very good discussion, I must say. There was some good stuff coming out of there. So we're going to talk about long-term plan financial strategy. And for all those who are on the Audit and Risk Committee, this is a hot topic of our chair. And I agree with him. This is the bit that the glue that holds it all together. Effectively, if we don't get this right, then our LTP won't work. So I will start again with legislation for those of you who might have heard this earlier on. And for you, Andrew, you won't have heard this. So this is a bit of a recap. Financial strategy, we must prepare and adopt as part of our long-term plan, a financial strategy for all of the years covered by the long-term plan. That's section 101A1. So what that means is we need to provide a 10-year financial strategy. And we need to be thinking about the things that are coming at us. And I'm thinking rates cap here. We can't leave it till the next LTP. We have to deal with it in this financial strategy, even though we don't know what it looks like. Its purpose is to facilitate prudent financial management by council by providing a guide to consider proposals for funding and expenditure. So that's section 101A2A. And what that basically means is that you should be looking at things like rates and debt and levels of service in light of the financial strategy. You must also provide a context for consultation on council's proposals for funding and expenditure by making transparent the overall effects of proposals on council's levels of service, its rate, its debts and investment. Now, if you look at a consultation document, what that means is you have to deal with each practical option. You have to deal with all of the impacts of rates, debt and levels of service on each of those options when you go out to consult with your ratepayers. So that's where that's coming from. Next slide, thanks, Wayne. The financial strategy must, and this is under section 101A, 3A, 1 to 3, include a statement of the factors that are expected to have significant impact on the council, including expected change of population, so your growth, changes in use of land and capital, and the capital and operating costs of providing those changes. So if we had a whole bunch of development happening, which we do, there is a cost associated with providing for that development. Water, sewer, stormwater, roading, those types of things. There would be a cost potentially if it's a large growth. You might have to provide a new swimming pool. That's all part of that cost of providing for that growth. So we need to cover all of that off. So we need to deal with expected capital expenditure on network infrastructure. With the removal of Three Waters, the only network infrastructure that we would have is roading. That is defined in the Act. We don't deal with stop banks and the like, and Three Waters is gone. We also need to deal with other significant factors affecting council's ability to maintain existing levels of service and to meet additional demands for services. Right. So that's the legislation. So what they're actually doing is they're saying, thinking about the future, what's impacting your district, and growth is going to be one of those things. How are you dealing with it? And what's that going to do with, how is that going to impact if you're not dealing with it appropriately, or you've decided to deal with it differently, how is that going to impact your levels of service? That's what it's talking about there. Next slide, thanks, Wayne. It also, this may change obviously as we go forward, because the quantified limits on rates increases will be dictated to us potentially. We currently have a number plus LGCI, which is Local Government Construction Index. We use that rather than CPI because construction costs never, there's a different basket of goods that are measured there. So we currently use local government construction index plus 5% as our maximum rates increase. That's obviously going to change potentially with rates capping. And we are also required to provide an assessment of our ability to provide and maintain existing levels of service and meet additional demands for service. That will take on a whole new meaning when we talk about rates capping. And that's why I did the investment policy. But first, because the investment policy can feed into that. And if we have a cap of 4%, for argument's sake, with our investments, wisely using our investments, we could possibly add 3 or 4% of services and levels of service and meeting additional services through that revenue stream rather than relying on rates.
So that financial strategy set down by the Crown or our legislature hasn't changed at all, just the rules of which how we can spend it. So is there a chance that that will change?
I suspect that that will be part of the legislation change because, you know, unless there is.
You sort of can't have one without the other. You've got to have some figures in the middle. But if growth over 6% in your region, you can do stuff. And that's just going to choke us.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're playing the ball that's being bowled at us right now, which is the current legislation. We don't know
with the
until after the election. Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen until after the election anyway. So, you know, we'll probably end up having to change that at the next one. But we should start thinking about, given the government's, as I said, this is where it's important, the government's oversight. They're not saying you must, they're saying you should. What else is needed? The next slide, thanks, Wayne. What else is needed? And I'll come back. I always come back to this one. We've also got to consider the balanced budget requirements. Now, Section 100 of the Local Government Act requires us to balance the budget. What does that mean? So each year's projected operating revenues are set at a level sufficient to meet that year's projected operating expenses. And operating expenses includes depreciation. And that's where that concept of funded depreciation comes in. I'll talk a little bit about that later. There is an out unless you consider it prudent not to. And prudence is acting with care and thought for the future. So you should be thinking about how that might play out when you look at balancing the budget.
By ignoring depreciation on, especially on things like bridges, which this council has done in the past, it's not a sort of position we're in now. With our bridges falling over.
All of our bridges are over 50 years anyway, so they would have been depreciated.
The issue with, see, this is a new concept. 2002 funded depreciation was real, the balanced budget stuff really kicked in. So your first run, I mean, we've had 24 years of it now. For councils who funded depreciation from the start, they have built up reserves and there would be sufficient funds there. But it wouldn't be all of the money required to replace a bridge because the bridge is 50 years old, right? 60, 70, whatever. It's
borrowings cover the bit.
So it was, nobody was thinking about that back then. So borrowing would have to cover that difference. Yeah. You've got the complication of NZTA funding as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but I'm not getting into too much detail with that.
The risk of depreciation, and I'll keep going back to as you look at the regional deals and we get amalgamated with someone else, should we be depreciating?
Well, I guess
it could be a new entity, I guess I'm saying. So we're actually directly taking from the ratepayer now, when in 5 or 10 years' time we're part of Queensland Lakes. Why would we want to be doing that?
Well, I guess the thing is that you are responsible for the assets that you currently have, right? So by saying that let's not depreciate because we might be taken over and Queenstown Lakes will be running the show, I think if you've collected the money for a particular area, bridge, whatever, for our roading network, there should be an obligation, you'd think, that the money that this council's collected is spent in this council's area.
Yeah, but I guess in a financial strategy, we don't know that because we don't know the outcome of who we're going to be run by.
So you've got to be prudent. And prudence is thinking into the future. And I would say that not funding depreciation on the basis that something might happen is not prudent. I'll argue with you, Stu, on that one.
Yeah, I guess I understand that, but it's like, well, the depreciation we've collected probably not enough to replace the bridges, all the bridges anyway.
Well, if you took that argument, then you'd be turning around and saying, well, we're not going to maintain anything because we might end up in a different ownership model or someone else might be running the show. So let's not maintain our assets.
Or replace. Yeah.
You know?
What my fear is well and truly that we've been told that Unitary Authority come along and we're penalising the ratepayer now. We could take 4%, 3% out of our rates or 2% out of our depreciation's only get the cost of our asset going up, but depreciation's only be the 4%.
Yeah.
Are they forced? Are we being forced, I guess, through the capping to address these issues, head them head on? Is it we're going to get rid of some of those bridges and not do them?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think we have enough information around that, but I would suggest that you still have a responsibility to act prudently. And I think that if you decided, we take Three Waters for argument's sake, that we didn't fund all of the depreciation for the last 2 years of our ownership because we were certain we were transferring ownership. So we benefited the current ratepayers rather than the future user charges. That was a certainty. We're not certain of what's happening. And I think that for us to look at something and say, let's not depreciate because something might happen, is not being a great steward, to be fair. Yeah, that's my view. I mean, the council might view it differently.
Yeah, I just think that's the clarity. We don't know what the rules are around rate.
We don't.
You're asking us to make, the Crown's asking us to make pretty big decisions.
The Crown doesn't know what the rules are yet either.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is that nobody knows. It's all speculation as to what might be, recognising that there's another election between now and then.
Yeah.
So even if we get a look at what things might look like over the next couple of months, that may well change before the year.
So having said all of that, can you go to the next slide, Wayne? You may set your operating revenue at a different level. So you do have that option. Where you resolve again, it is financially prudent to do so. So there would be a resolution on the books that says we believe that it is financially prudent not to fund, for argument's sake, depreciation on halls that we are not going to replace. So you could do that. So all of those little community halls out in the district, the ones that you scheduled for divestment at the last LTP, you can resolve that you believe it's not financially prudent to fully fund the operating costs, which includes depreciation, because you are going to get rid of them. Effectively what we did for the Three Waters when we did it for the LTP, because we knew we were passing it on. So where did we get to? So you got to have regard to the estimated expenses of achieving and maintaining the predicted levels of service. So that's kind of, you're maintaining it. So, you know, window gets broken, you budget for that, but you wouldn't, as I say, budget for the replacement of it. So your funded depreciation would kick in there. You would also look at the projected revenue available to fund the estimated expenses. I guess another a good one there is you don't fully fund depreciation on roading because there's a contribution from NZTA, and the equitable allocation of responsibility for funding the provision and maintenance of the assets. So that's what you've got to consider. Have the next slide. Thanks, Wayne. Now you would have all seen this if you'd read the LTP and the financial strategy. This is the next 10 years from our previous LTP, and we can see that we balanced the budget. And, you know, we're looking quite good. In the future years, there's a little bit of a blip in 26, 27, comes right down to the line. But apart from that, we're well above it. But if you move to the next slide, thanks, Wayne, that's not actually the case because we have used land sales to offset balancing the budget, which effectively is we're using a capital, almost like using the silverware.
It's only in one region though.
Sorry?
The land,
Just a toss.
yeah, but I mean, it's because of Cromwell's been having the land sales to do assets.
That's what I'm saying. I think fundamentally, and I know Bruce would agree, I'll just bring his name up every now and again. That's probably not a good thing to do because it is using the silverware to pay the overdraft, pay for the groceries, if you like. And it's once it's gone type of thing.
So that comes out of two things. The dream of having bigger presents in the Christmas sack, or not funding development contributions at a high enough level for the development to pay for it.
It's not.
Well, we made that decision, or staff made that decision at COVID time not to charge depreciation at that full level. Maybe don't start the economy, for a better word.
Well, I do actually have a slide on, I think it's actually, we're not funding the correct levels of depreciation. And there's two reasons for that. If you go to the next slide, thanks, Wayne. So what that's actually saying is we're not collecting enough operating revenue, excluding land sales, to fund our operating expenditure. So what that tends to mean is that we're using our cash reserves to pay for stuff. And ultimately, the end result of that, not saying we're there, we're anywhere near it, but the end result as you go through is you borrow. And you have to borrow because you've used up all your cash reserves, et cetera, et cetera.
Using borrowings for OPEX, which is just.
And you don't borrow for OPEX. That's a fundamental rule that, you know.
So the argument to that over the last 20 years, the time I've been here, and even Tim could overturn, was that we need to put the rates up to cover the cost of doing the business we're doing, and we didn't. We stayed at 5% cap because that was where we wanted to be to get re-elected.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that's exactly it.
That's where, and that was 15 or 20 years ago. Yeah. Like it just flows on. We're now we're catching it.
Yeah. So the danger is we're using capital revenue with land sales, but that could be flowing on to anything to fund operational costs. Okay, next one. Thanks, Wayne. We're going to pick the pace up. So why do we have an unbalanced budget? It's two reasons. We've utilised reserves to fund operational costs, and we what that means is we've collected in the past, we've built up a reserve, and we're now using it to reduce revenue required. And we've not fully funded depreciation where it's appropriate to do so. So you might be wondering on the next slide what funded depreciation is. Depreciation, as you know, business owners will have depreciation. It's a non-cash expense, and it is effectively measures the consumption or the economic consumption of an asset over its life. So as you use it, as it wears out, ultimately you have to replace it. That depreciation recognises that wearing out thing. It gives effect to intergenerational equity because you're allocating a proportion of the cost of the asset to the current generation, and you're allocating next year to the future generation as well. And at the end of the asset's useful life, sufficient cash has been collected to fund the purchase of the next asset. That's the purpose of funding it. That stop it. On a
Optimistic.
on a normal, no inflation, no change in asset values, that works. Yeah. The issue is that the cost of putting those assets in keeps increasing, and that's why we revalue our assets every year in terms of the three waters and roading. And that's why depreciation increases every year, because we have to. The value of the asset's gone up, and that's why we rate more in the depreciation space. So ultimately, at the end of the asset's life, because of the revaluations, the theory is that you would have had enough money collected to replace it.
long as it wasn't spent on another asset, it'd been spent somewhere else because it's a pot of money to be spent.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing as using it.
So some assets have long lives. So if you look at a building, that's 50+ years. And that can be spread over those number of years, whereas some have short lives and they are spread over a short term. So we would have different spends. For argument's sake, the Cromwell Hall, the building itself would have a 50-year plus lifespan. So it would be 1 to 2% depreciation rate, but it's got a whole bunch of IT kit in there that might have a 3 to 5 year rate. So that would wear out earlier. The depreciation rate would reflect that. So you'd be collecting more money on those assets. So it's not a straight 2% across all assets, or all the asset in the building. So we do separate them out. Next slide, thanks, Wayne.
It's depreciation. It's just the easy one to pick off when you are struggling to look for money. It's just that. It's a bit like when you got your
Yeah, and I guess
the money at home,
I've got no
what
problem with
goes first,
depreciation.
fertiliser gets, because it's the easiest one just to cut.
I've got no problem with depreciation, but in a lot of ways we should have massive depreciation reserves sitting in our accounts, and we haven't because it's been pots of money that's been invested somewhere else. Like it is, it's
Or
not
not depreciated properly.
and I'll just wonder, technology would be cheaper to pay for the technology and not depreciate it because it changes so quickly that it would be very hard to depreciate an asset that reduces basically once you get the software, it's done for next week, it's done.
Yeah, the accounting treatment would require you to capitalise and therefore depreciate some of that stuff. Software's treated differently, that's intangible, but if you're buying a computer, for argument's sake, a laptop, you'd capitalise it and have it there for 3 years. You'd write off a 33 1/3 each year. So that we have to follow the generally accepted accounting principles as well. So you wouldn't do that. So first one is use of reserves. So we built up reserves. The classic one was in the building control area, where we had a bit of a boom. We continue to have a bit of a boom. Continue to receive user, building consent fees, et cetera, but we continued rating at the same time. So it built up a reasonable reserve, which we then we decided at the last LTP to use that reserve to get rid of it. Because for those types of things, you shouldn't really be running reserves. And that then has an impact further out, because once the reserve's used up, you've got to bring the rates back up to cover it. And tourism, we've had that tourism $400,000 sitting in there for a while. That was generated from government grants, so now we're using it, but we've reduced rates so we're not double dipping effectively. That all has an impact on balancing the budget because we've reduced our revenue. So yeah, the boom doesn't use of reserves. Once we've used them, it comes straight back on the rates next year and has a bigger effect. But it also may mask an underlying cost revenue problem in other parts of the business. If we're using reserves, might be masking or hiding something else.
So those reserves you wouldn't be able to put in an investment fund to offset because you've collected rates on them. So you've overcharged rates.
Yep. There's two things, well, not only necessarily overcharged rates. If you've got a building boom, for argument's sake, there is an argument to say that your fees are too high because you're supposed to recover your costs. It's not a profit-making part of the business. So cost recovery is what you should be doing. So if you get a building boom and you've got building consents going through the roof, generating revenue that's in excess of what your costs are, that's where a lot of that came from, as well as rates. So there would be an argument to say, well, our fees and charges are too high for the amount of volume that we have going through. So that's one side of it. The other side is there's a public good part of the building activity because it's, people want to be able to know that the houses that they're building are safe and going to fall down or get leaky homes or whatever. Yep. So that public good part comes into play, which is where the rates component sits. So if you've got your revenue too high from building because it's just expanding and going gangbusters. You can live with that for 2 or 3 years, but if it's 5, 6, 7 years, then you really should be looking at what fees and charges are, because you are not supposed to make, it's not a profit generator.
But Peter could fix that quite easily if he's got to put more planning staff on or do more building inspectors. It can be a moving thing because
Absolutely.
Bill's great.
Absolutely.
Like, you got rid of it, there you go, actually, we need 14 more staff in this division.
You could buy some social housing for the building inspectors reserves.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Like, he's got to have a budget to be able to say, we need to be pushing forward in this direction.
Yeah.
And the regulatory change is happening, so he could get rid of $1 million very quickly. And
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to structure your organisation to fit what you're doing. And if we've got a boom and we're using contractors to do it, then you might want to, what I'd suggest is your contractors cost you more than the building inspector might. But you've got to look at all of those things, because otherwise you end up and people turn around and say, hang on, I'm paying too much here because you're making.
they're not getting the services. They're paying enough, they get the services, and we have to keep,
Yep. So that was one of them. And then obviously you've got, as I said, underlying cost revenue problems. So I can have the next slide. I'm coming up to the chart, which is good. So depreciation is an operating expense. It's not a cash expense, but collecting it is, you need to generate levy rates to collect it. So that is the concept of funded depreciation. And if we move on to the next slide, you would have seen this. Gasewick presented this not too long ago. Might have been December. What this is showing us is it was for the annual plan when we were talking about the annual plan. So this is showing us our funded depreciation levels. Now, ignore Three Waters, because Three Waters out of council control, operational control, 1 July 2027. And ignore transport, because they have a deal with NZTA. So we're only required to fund 49% of what we do effectively. You can see that we are short by about 29% in property and community facilities, so we're not funding that. We are short 3% in pools, parks and cemeteries, and in governance and corporate services, we're about 80% short. So those are the areas we're not fully funding 100% depreciation, and that's why you can end up with an unbalanced budget. So move on to the next slide, Wayne, thanks. So you don't need to fund all of our depreciation. There are exceptions, roading, because NZTA contributes. However, with NZTA being our funder, they kind of set where they want money to be spent. So there's a potential that they might shift from OPEX to CAPEX to OPEX. So we could end up with a funding gap where they're not fully funding their share of depreciation and we are fully funding our share of depreciation. So the question is, what happens then? And I think that'll be developed over our long-term plan process. And that could also then lead to the network deteriorating over time. Again, these are all long-term things, but there's an issue there. Three Waters was only funded 50% because I've explained we decided that we weren't going to fully fund it while we were treating it as an asset, a sale effectively. So we didn't need to. We're ignoring that. And if we ignore the two above, we are actually short 1.6 million in income rates.
Everything other than those two.
Other than those two.
And that's 3%, hey, brother?
Yes.
So there's your 4% rates cap right there almost.
Yep.
Right. So in that, you go to your parks and the pools and those services, that valuation went hundreds and hundreds or millions of dollars, correct?
Yeah, but if you think about parks and pools, that's done every 5 years. Okay, so there was a 4 4.1% increase in 2025 in the value and depreciation associated with that value. But if we had revalued it every year, it would have been less than 1% per annum. We don't revalue those every year. We revalued it after 5 years.
So we're in the situation with that, we have to borrow the money to pay depreciation. Right,
We just run with an unbalanced budget, but what we actually have to say is, how are we going to fix it? And that might be, for argument's sake, we run revaluations every year or every 2 years for them, so the impact is not as bad. We can actually do an assessment ourselves to look at the changes in values. It's quite
the only way you're going to do it, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
Because the value keeps going up, your depreciation will go up with it. You want to click no more rates.
Right, yeah. So if we can move to the next slide. Thanks, Wayne. See if I can bring this home by one. So we have other funding sources is why we don't depreciate. And it might be, for argument's sake, a swimming pool. You may have we know that we might get some money from lotteries or licensing, whatever. Wouldn't necessarily fully fund depreciation because you know you've got that other income stream coming in. Once you've built it, you would want to start doing it. But if you've got a continual other income stream from external, you might not want to fully fund depreciation because the funding from the external party covers that. We've also decided not to replace an asset. So that's your community halls. You don't need to depreciate those because they're going to be off the books. Timing of asset evaluations also in relation to the timing of our budget prep. So we prepare our budgets now. We'll revalue our assets as at 30 June. So we've got that gap where in terms of the budget, we might not have the right levels of depreciation. So your first year, you may end up with an unbalanced budget. There is an argument to be made that you estimate higher than what you think it's going to be, and you put that in and wait for your valuations to come in so you're not losing that year.
And we set the valuation of their assets, or done externally?
They're done externally. So we do all the prep and then it fires off to external parties to.
So we're caught up in the same growth that every part of the region is.
But I think it's more of a timing thing for us. We're expected to prepare the budgets for adoption on 30 June. We do the work on the revaluations August, September-ish. We hope to have it finalised by August so we can put it in. So we've missed the boat because the council's resolved to adopt the annual plan / long-term plan and to set its rates. So we've missed the boat for that year on any changes. And we've also made some decisions on, for argument's sake, the Cromwell Hall that we might not want to depreciate for the first few years because it's brand new. But you never get that depreciation back. So it should be done from day one. So next slide, thanks, Wayne. Yeah, oh, this is going to be close. Right, so this is pulling together the divergent parts. 2%. So we've got the potential for a rates cap from 2029 of between 2 and 4%. And they're monitoring progress towards that. We've assumed 4% in all our discussions. Every time we talk 4%. We don't know whether that's going to be, Commerce Commissioner doing a CPI minus X, which is what the power companies have, which limits us to closer to the 2% end. We don't know what that's going to be. So I think we shouldn't get into the trap of kidding ourselves. It might be 4 because it might not, which kind of makes it a little bit tougher. And whatever the government decide, this then becomes the fiscal envelope. This is what we will have to operate within. We do not get the option of what we have done in the past, which was put everything in to deliver the levels of service that we have said, and whatever the rates number comes out is the rates number that comes out, and then we start talking about it. It's going to be between 2 and 4, cut your cloth. There might be exceptions, we don't know any of that, but I think to be an effective cap, it has to be, there will be penalties for going over it. We don't know what that's going to be. So those are issues there. Our fiscal envelope is going to determine our levels of service. And that's why it's so important. That's why I led off with the investment policy, because it's so important to start generating other income streams. So if you don't be stuck at 2% or 4%, whatever it is, whereas the income streams will help deliver other levels of service. Currently, we don't balance the budget, and we're not projected to balance the budget if we exclude land sales, which I think we should. I think I think we're kidding ourselves because land's going to run out at some stage, and it might be 10, 20 years down the track, but we won't be able to do that. I think we've got to try and start to set ourselves up to start doing it. We've used reserves to offset rates. These reserves will be used up by the time we go into our next LTP. So we're going to have to replace those with rates or another source of income. Next slide. Thanks, Wayne. I think, as I said, land sales should come off the table. I don't think it's prudent for us to be using them to fund operational costs.
That's been highlighted by Audit 2 in the past, hasn't it? Of how have you come up with these figures?
Yeah.
We're deluding ourselves.
Yeah, depreciation should be funded from day one. You can't catch them up. If you leave it for 5 years, that's 5 years worth of.
So what is day one depreciation on the Cromwell Hall? 100K?
Yeah, as a minimum, because I know it's probably the maximum.
2%.
Yeah, 2% on the total cost. Yeah. There will be small bits,
So that's
$500,000 might be fit outs and stuff, which will have a different depreciation rate.
Just I can give an example of that if you want clarity. So sort of got short, medium, long-term depreciation. Short would be things like your lighting and stuff like that, which would be replaced with every 5-ish years. The HVAC and things like that would do every sort of 10 to 15. And then the longer stuff, the bricks.
Yeah, so it's not all 50 years contract.
Yeah, but it's, if you go after Three Waters, it's about 470 or 430,000 is 1% rates rise. So $1 million is 2.
I mean, we can build this into the LTP for the hall, but we haven't built it into the next annual plan.
No, we haven't.
So we have effectively missed that first year. Because it opens on this.
But it makes sense for it to go out in the LTP.
That's right.
Right.
We'll have the Roxburgh Event Centre in future years once we build that. Obviously, we don't depreciate it because it's not there anymore. So whenever it gets built and finalised, there will be a depreciation cost on that.
And the hub.
And the hub, exactly. Yeah. We need to be thinking about expected levels of services versus affordable levels of services, and they don't always align. Tracy gave that example of, the council that reduced their levels of service and there was an uproar. But, we've got to do all this within the constraints of our money that we can levy. I'm suggesting we pool all depreciation from like activity. So all of the swimming pool money, for argument's sake, depreciation goes into a pool depreciation fund, because not all pools will need replacing at the same time. So you get better bang for buck if you are aggregating it up rather than jam-jarring it down. And that will help get you through the initial, if we've got a pool being needed to be replaced. David, you were talking about that within in the next 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, and what does a pool cost to replace?
One of the arguments that has been debated on this table in the past about, especially about depreciation on pools, was because the capital costs of replacement was found in trusts, grants, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I've talked about that before. So you could, if you were certain that you could raise that money, you could, and I know a couple of councils who only funded, for argument's sake, 50% because of swimming pools, because they were confident that they could raise the balance from fundraising, lotteries and all that carry on. So,
Charities, et cetera, et
but
cetera.
that's a decision that the council would sit down and say, we consider it financially prudent not to fund 100% because of boom, boom.
So currently, are we funding 100% of depreciation on pools?
No, I don't think we are.
No, I don't think we are.
I don't think we are now. We've grown to the last LTP.
So how far can you extend that to like the whole in Omakau that's mostly
Well,
funded?
that's exactly, I think that's the things you can take that philosophy out to other things.
Could you take that out to your buildings? Some of your buildings.
Because the Omakau pool is going to be brand new, it's been partially funded from contributions from outside parties. How confident would you be in 50 years' time of being able to achieve the same thing?
You'd argue that about Cromwell though.
Sorry?
You'd argue that about the Cromwell Hall.
You're saying you wouldn't be able to?
It would be a little bit, I mean, if you were looking at a pool that requires replacement in 15 years' time, and you were thinking about, well, we could get money from X, Y, and Z, you could turn around and say, well, we're only going to fund 50%, 75%, whatever the rate would be.
100% depreciation.
If you built something brand new and it's had contributions to it, you've got to think about, will we be able to do the same thing again in 50 years' time? So it's the confidence level. I think the further out you go, the less certain you become. And I wouldn't even be certain if we were talking about is it the Ramfurly pool? Ramfurly pool in 15 years' time of saying, yes, we'll get outside funding. Absolutely wouldn't be confident of that at all, because I think it's too far out for people to be making funding decisions.
So you only make the funding decision when you actually pulled the trigger to build the pool.
I guess what I'm saying is some councils have taken that risk. And that is a risk, because if you don't get the funding, you're short what you need.
And then you don't replace the pool.
It just falls on the local community to dig in and sort it out.
Well, what happened with
So some communities will be better at doing that than others.
well, what happened with Omakau? Well, that's the recent thing. The funding was there was a shortfall of funding and council was required to step in. Okay, that's fine. I guess, were we expecting that? No. When did we look at that? Probably a couple of years ago. That was when with the fundraising committee were pretty confident they could deliver what they said they would. So we put in the initial amount of money based on that discussion. I think it's too risky.
So moving so quickly.
Yeah.
Between getting a quote and then being ready to go 12 months later, some of them are finding costs increasing by 30 or 40%.
I've got technology and regulatory changes. So when you put on, say, the Ramfurly pool to when the Roxburgh pool went, because they're actually two classic examples of similar sizes. Look at all the tech that's actually in the Roxburgh pool. So if you're only depreciating for a Ramfurly pool, you need to replace it with a Roxburgh pool to actually have even a depreciation gap. So it's that improvement level of service as opposed to just a pure like flight.
And then can I add to that as well? In 15 or 20 years' time, the population would have inevitably grown considerably, and so you probably want a bigger pool, a bigger central hall or hub. And so then you'd have that gap as well that
We're not going to catch up.
Yeah, but-
Coles, a classic example.
Yeah.
It's growing faster than any time that I've been in this room here, and we're playing catch up, but trying to keep ahead. And we've only been hamstrung because of the rates cap. And
That's not the only reason.
well,
We've also reached a point with people, we've reached peak rates. People don't want to pay.
well, then services.
Not
There's only one option: is reduction in service.
No, there's another option, your investment fund, get it going pretty quickly.
But until this morning, there hasn't been an
But
appetite.
what I'm saying, we're in dead man's corner, we can't, the rates are under the cap and people don't want a reduction in services, so.
My challenge is rates aren't at a cap.
No,
But the pressure from the community is telling us we don't want any more.
but I go back to your question to our most recent candidates around this table, and the comment that Charlie made when he first got elected, he was surprised that the rest of us were back here because of the appetite for change out there. And the reality is, the majority of people in this community are accepting rate increases because the costs of doing business is going up. I don't think we've reached.
Well, we're forced to now anyway. So
Yeah, we're forced to, but-
my debate, my argument's
I've
done.
always agreed with you, Stu, that we haven't reached maximum rates because we've come off a very low base, and that's the cost of doing
And
business.
we've been doing everything the ratepayer wants in the government by selling down assets to fund the gap so the rates didn't get astronomical. But we've got growth now and capital growth that's bigger than anywhere in New Zealand. So people don't mind being here, but we just need to get more income to pay for existing services. But if you depreciate the pool, we had a perfect chance to get rid of one in Alexandra with an uproar between the community and all the kids came along wanting to swim outside.
Yes.
So, but then we can't depreciate all of that because we're capped. So we all got to, you've got to turn around at some stage and tell all the rest of the staff when you walk out the door, Peter does, that you're over, you're done. Because appreciation is going to take up any of our 4% that we've got. Just to keep the existing stuff we've got. Or
Yeah.
basically Rebecca's sitting there going, Stu, I'm going to throw this here.
And it is interesting because when you look at the affordability, because there is a bit about rates affordability in the Act as well. So some councils choose not to depreciate
Yeah.
because, and they've got big rates because they can't afford to, the impact. So they have taken that into consideration. So it's not an unfair consideration to say we can't afford to fund 100% of depreciation because we know the impact is going to be significant. And the LGFA, which sits over the top of this sometimes and you know, weighs that up as well. So we're not alone in how we've treated this, but to resolve it, it's not a significant step up. 1.6 million might be significant because it's 3%, but there's some councils that have to lift their rates by 30% to fund depreciation.
We're in good shape.
Good shape.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Great shape. And we've got a new central Otago. You talk about the things that had the discussion. We've got a new central Otago, new water, got new halls, got new facilities at Omacare, other than pulling Randford about all that people want in the next 10 to 15 years. And now we're being told that we can't keep growing the way we were.
Yeah, look, I think if I if I came across as being like down, no, we're in a lot better position than a lot of councils. We've got debt capacity. We have the ability to, if we want to, we've got the ability to change and get some additional revenue streams, that sort of stuff. And in answer to Peter's comment around some councils don't fund depreciation, they don't, they borrow. But then you get into and effectively it ends up being the same. But it depends what you've got to do, because if you've got a lot of stuff to do, you start to get towards that cap, and that's kind of constrains you. So it's not all doom and gloom. We are in a good position,
and we're quite fortunate because a lot of our debt is associated with Three Waters, which will be transferred across to the water services industry. Now, our cap will reduce as a result of our revenue reducing, but still have a really good credit rating. So,
and you'd argue the reason we're in that position because the councils before this one and the ones before in the last 15 years have been pretty prudent what they did. Now, whether they were right or not, and they were, the Nigel McKinley sat there for a long time just making sure that we didn't blow the top. And so the Neil Gillespie's or the community boards before. So, it's not anything.
And you and I.
And you and I.
Well, is there any
That's the last slide.
It's the last
That
slide.
is the last slide.
You there,
So
Charlie?
what I'm asking is that
Did you get that, Charlie?
we need to start thinking about these types of things because when we build our budget, we're going to start looking at what fully funding depreciation looks like and coming with that type of thing. So it's really just have that consideration and the process around it.
LTP consideration.
Fully funding depreciation. You will have to resolve at your LTP why you're not.
It won't be a consultation.
It wouldn't be a conflict.
No,
Financial strategies in there and they're ready, you know, so.
it's not a key consultation issue.
It might be a statement and, you know, that the mayor might make in the opening that we're moving to.
You're gonna tell Rebecca that the committee outcomes, we're just gonna.
I'm not telling Rebecca anything. Why do you think I wanted to go first?
I'll tell her.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
6 minutes. We will have a quick break for lunch. Be back here at 1:35. That's all right.
Thank you.
5 extra minutes.
CMC.